and so we settle in. You can feel your body beginning to grow heavy in the most pleasant way. In our time together tonight, there is nothing to examine, nothing to understand, only the gentle rhythm of a story. Let go of the day's concerns, of any thoughts that cling to you. They are not needed here. Allow them to drift away like motes of dust in a sunbeam, leaving behind only this quiet space and the sound of my voice. Tonight, we will drift into a strange, shadowed corner of the past, to follow the story of the men who were paid to eat sin. Before we drift too far, if you feel a connection to this place of rest, you're welcome to leave a quiet, like, or subscribe. Think of it not as a task, but as leaving a soft footprint in the sand before you continue your journey inward. And if you feel so inclined, you could leave a quiet comment below, letting me know in which city and at what time you are listening. It's a comforting thought, isn't it? All of us, scattered across the world, showering this same stillness together. Alright? Let the shadows in your room grow long and soft. Maybe you can hear the faint sound of your own breathing. And together, let's allow the story to begin. The air in the cottage is thick and still, heavy with the scent of wood smoke, sweat, and something else. Something medicinal and vaguely sweet. The smell of a life coming to its slow, quiet end. You are standing in the corner, trying to make yourself as small as possible. Your back pressed against the rough, cold plaster of the wall. You are not family. You are not a friend. You are simply here, an observer in a room where a man is taking his final, rattling breaths. A single tallow candle flickers on a small, three-legged stool, casting long, dancing shadows that make the small room feel both cavernous and claustrophobic. In the center of the room is a simple wooden bed. Under a coarse woolen blanket, a shape lies still, its chest rising and falling with a shallow, ragged rhythm. This is Thomas, the village blacksmith, a man whose arms, you remember, were once as thick as tree branches, whose laughter could be heard from one end of the lane to the other. Now, he is just a whisper of a man, lost in the landscape of his own bedding. His wife, Elspeth, sits on a stool by his side, her face pale and drawn in the wavering light. Her hands are clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles white. Two grown sons stand near the hearth, their faces grim. They look awkward, their large frames too big for this small, sad space. They aren't looking at their father. They are looking at the door. Everyone is looking at the door. There is a tension in the silence, an unspoken question hanging in the air. The local vicar has already been and gone, offering prayers and last rites. But that, it seems, was not enough. Thomas, in his final moments of clarity, had whispered something, a plea that the vicar's God could not, or would not, answer. He had asked for the sin minor seater. And so, you all wait. One of the sons, the younger one, shifts his weight and mutters under his breath, "This is foolishness. Old superstition." His voice is a low rumble, meant only for his brother. But in the thick quiet, it carries. The vicar gave him peace. The mother, Elspeth, turns her head just slightly. "Your father's soul carries the weight of 60 years," she says, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "The work of a blacksmith is hard, and his temper was harder. There are things," curses muttered in the heat of the fort. Deals struck with a heavy thumb on the scales. The Lord's Prayer is for the soul's journey, but this is too light in the load it must carry. It's a strange and fascinating piece of folk theology, and historians to this day are still not entirely sure how to classify it. Was this a genuine, deeply held belief system that ran parallel to the church, a kind of spiritual black market? Or was it just a collection of disparate, local customs, later bundled together by fascinated folklorists? The truth, as is often the case, is probably a messy combination of the two, and it's being debated right here, in this stuffy little room. The older son shushes his brother. "Hold your tongue. It's what he wants." On the chest of the dying man, placed there with a trembling hand by his wife, sits a small wooden trencher. On the trencher is a thick slice of dark, coarse spread into small, pinched pile of salt. That is the vessel. That is the sponge that will soak up a lifetime of petty cruelties, of quiet dishonesty, yes, of anger and envy. Lying next to the trencher, on the blanket, are for small, dull coins, 4 pence, the payment. It seems a pitifully small price for a man's eternal damnation. But then, desperation has never been a good negotiator. A sudden sound makes you all jump. A floorboard creaks in the loft above. A mouse, perhaps, or just the old cottage settling. But the sound snaps the tension like a dry twig. Every eye darts back to the door, expectant, waiting. The silence stretches again, pulled taut. The only sounds are the blacksmith's rasping breath and the soft hissing pop of the candle. You find yourself holding your own breath. You are waiting for a monster. A ghoul? Some dreaded creature of the night. That's what the stories say, isn't it? That the sin minus eater is a cursed being, shunned and feared. Then, you hear it. A soft, hesitant scratching at the wooden door. Not a knock, a scratch. Like a stray animal asking to be let in from the cold. Elspeth, the wife, rises slowly, her joints stiff. She doesn't look at her sons. She keeps her eyes fixed on the door as she walks towards it. Her hand reaches for the simple iron nut. The room is so quiet now. You can hear the faint rasp of metal on metal as she lifts it. The door groans open, just a crack, letting in a sliver of the cold night air, and with it, a shadow. The man who slips through the gap in the door is not the monster you were expecting. There are no horns, no scent of sulfur. He is, in a way, far more unsettling. He is just a man. A desperately thin, wretched minus-looking man who seems to be made of little more than damp will and quiet misery. He is stooped, as if carrying a weight you cannot see, and his clothes are a patchwork of faded, earth-minus stone drags that seem to be slowly composting right on his body. He smells of wet leaves, of cold wood smoke, and the sour tang of unwashed human loneliness. He keeps his eyes fixed on the floorboards, his face hidden by a curtain of greasy, matted hair. He doesn't say a word. He simply stands there, just inside the door, a pool of shadow and sorrow that seems to drain the little warmth from the room. Elspeth takes a full step back from him, her hand coming up to her mouth as if to stifle a gasp, or perhaps to stop her own soul from escaping and being tainted by his presence. Over by the house, the two sons press themselves tighter against the stonework, their earlier bravado gone, replaced by a primal, superstitious fear. No one looks at him, not directly. They look at the space he occupies, the air around him. To look a sin minus eater in the eye, so the stories go, is to invite his curse upon yourself. This is the strange, unspoken contract of his existence. He is a walking repository of spiritual filth, a man who has willingly become a vessel for the transgressions of others. For the price of a few coins and a meal, he takes the sins of the dead upon himself, damning his own soul so that theirs might travel to the afterlife and burden. It's a terrifying, lonely profession, and its practitioners were, unsurprisingly, the most shunned members of society. They lived on the fringes, often in a dilapidated hut in the woods, or a forgotten hovel at the edge of the village, spoken to only when their grim services were required. He shuffles forward, his bare feet making a soft, wet sound on the wooden floor. He moves with a slow, deliberate purpose, his gaze still lowered. You notice his hands. They are chapped and dry, the nails broken and trimmed with dirt. He is not just poor. He is a portrait of absolute destitution. It is a powerful reminder that this is not a choice one makes lightly. This is a job you take when every other door has been slammed in your face, when starvation is not a fear but a physical presence gnawing at your belly. Elspeth gestures towards the bed with a short, sharp movement of her chin. It is not an invitation. It is an instruction. The sin minus eater obeys, his path taking him past the two sons, As he passes, the younger one, the skeptic, flinches and turns his face to the wall, as if the man's very proximity could infect him. The sin minus eater gives no sign that he notices. He is used to this. This revulsion is the price of his bread. His eyes, when he finally lifts them from the floor, do not seek out the faces of the living. They fix upon the bed, specifically upon the loaf, the salt, and the 4 dull coins resting on the dead man's chest. For a moment, a flicker of something crosses his face. Hunger, greed, it's hard to tell. This transaction is the very core of the ritual. Scholars still argue over its precise meaning. Is it a corrupted folk memory of the Eucharist? A blasphemous parody where bread absorbs sin instead of becoming the body of Christ? Or is it something far older? A pre-minus Christian custom of a ritual scapegoat? An idea that sin is a tangible substance that can be transferred and consumed? Looking at this grim, silent ceremony, you can see why the debate continues. It feels like both, and neither. The practice itself was never widespread, a strange and potent custom that clung stubbornly to the more remote corners of the British Isles, particularly in the borderlands between England and Wales, where old ways die hard. It was a folk remedy for a spiritual ailment, the terror of dying with a heavy conscience. In an age of high mortality and uncertain salvation, the sin minus eater offered a unique and tangible form of insurance. The sin minus eater has reached the bedside now. He stands over the dying blacksmith, a gaunt spectre in the candlelight. Thomas' breathing has become even more shallow, a faint, wet flutter. Does he know who is here? Can he sense the strange, grim savior who has come to perform this final, terrible service? The sin minus eater slowly, deliberately, raises one of his raw, chopped hands. His fingers, trembling slightly from cold or hunger or fear, hover over the coarse loaf of bread. The room is utterly silent. The air crackles. The ritual is about to begin. You find yourself leaning forward, unable to look away from this quiet, desperate theater of salvation and damnation. His hand, when it finally descends, isn't a gentle. His dirty fingers don't snatch at the bread. They make contact with a slow, almost reverent touch. For a moment, he simply rests his fingertips on the crust. It's as if he is taking its measure, feeling the weight of what it is about to become. He then picks it up, along with the little pile of salt, and cradles it in his palm. His eyes are closed now, and his lips begin to move, but no sound comes out. He is murmuring, a silent incantation known only to him. This is the most theatrical part of the ritual, the moment of transference. He begins to circle the bed, his bare feet shuffling in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. With each step, he passes the loaf of bread over the dying man's body, from head to foot, never touching him, but letting the bread hover just inches above the blanket. It is a slow, methodical sweep, a spiritual cleansing. You watch, mesmerized, as the bread passes over Thomas' still chest, his quiet belly, his useless legs. The family believes that with every pass, the sins of the blacksmith, his rages, his deceits, his petty jealousies, are being drawn out, pulled from his soul by an unseen force and absorbed into the porous, waiting crumb. The air in the room feels thick with invisible things. You can almost imagine it. A dark, greasy smoke rising from the dying man and sinking into the bread. The sin of a badly shod horse, causing it to go lame. The sin of a short measure of nails, sold to a trusting neighbor. The sin of a harsh word to his wife, a blow to his dog. A moment of hateful envy towards a more prosperous merchant. All of it, the entire messy ledger of a human life, is being soaked up by this single, humble piece of stale bread. After completing 3 full circles of the bed, the sin minus eater comes to a halt at the foot. He opens his eyes. They are dark, hollow pools, and for the first time, they seem to be looking at something other than the floor or the bread. He is looking at Thomas, though it feels as if he is looking right through him, at the soul cowering within the failing body. He raises the bread to his lips. There is a collective intake of breath from the family. This is it. The point of no return. The semi-eater takes a bite. The sound of his teeth tearing the tough crust is shockingly loud in the silence. He chews slowly, methodically, his jaw working with a grim determination. He does not look like a man enjoying a meal. He looks like a man taking his medicine. A foul-minus tasting draught he must consume to the last drop. With each chew, each swallow, he is taking the blacksmith's sins into himself. They are becoming part of him. Another layer of spiritual grime coating his own soul. Next, he licks the salt from the palm of his other hand, the sharp, stinging counterpoint to the bland bread. Salt, a symbol of preservation and purity in many cultures, here seems to serve a different purpose. Folklore sets have long debated its significance. Was it to purify the sin, making it bearable for the eater, or was it, as some bleaker interpretations suggest, meant to preserve the sin within the eater, ensuring it could never be purged? It's a chilling thought, that the salt wasn't a condiment, but a sealant. Then he turns to the small flagon of ale that Elspeth had placed on the floor beside the bed. He picks it up, and in one desperate gulp, he drains it. The ale is the final part of this grim meal, washing down the solid sins, settling them deep in his gut. Now they are his. The transaction is complete. As he lowers the flagon, a profound change seems to come over the room. The blacksmith, Thomas, lets out a long, slow sigh. It is not a rattle. It is not a gasp. It is a sound of release, as if a great weight has finally been lifted from his chest. His body seems to settle, to relax into the mattress. A moment later, he is still, utterly still. The ragged breathing has stopped. Elspeth lets out a small, choked sob. The two sons by the hearth finally move, stepping towards the bed to stand by their mother. They have what they wanted. Their father has died in peace. His soul, they believe, now light enough to begin its journey. The semi-eater, his task finished, seems to shrink back into himself. He is once again just a wretched, hungry man. He picks up the 4 pence from the blanket. His movements quick and furtive now. The coins disappear into a hidden fold of his rags. The payment is taken, the contract fulfilled. He doesn't look at the family. He doesn't look at the body. He simply turns and shuffles back towards the door. His job done. He has condemned himself a little further for the peace of another, and for the price of a mouthful of food and for miserable coins. As he slips out into the night, closing the door softly behind him, the family is already beginning to mourn. They have already forgotten him. He is just a tool, now discarded. The memory of that stuffy, quiet room begins to fade. The flickering candlelight dissolving into a cold, grey mist. The scent of medicinal herbs and wood smoke is replaced by the raw, damp smell of mud and withdraw. The low murmur of grief gives way to a new sound, a persistent, hollow ache that seems to be coming from inside your own body. It's the sound of hunger. Let's rewind the clock. Before you were an observer in a death-minus room. You were something else entirely. Now, you are not watching a man on the edge of starvation. You are the man on the edge of starvation. You are huddled in the husk of what was once a barn, on the forgotten outskirts of a village that has already forgotten you. The roof is a lattice of broken timbers, offering a bleak, filtered view of a perpetually overcast sky. Rain, a fine, miserable drizzle, finds its way through the gaps, peppering your thin tunic and chilling you to the bone. Your home is a pile of damp, rotting straw in the corner, shared with a family of enterprising rats who are, frankly, eating better than you are. Your name was William, once, or maybe John. It doesn't matter anymore. A name is a luxury for those who belong somewhere. You are just a shape, a shadow, a problem that the village wishes would just disappear. Maybe your family's small plot of land was enclosed by a wealthy landowner, pushing you off the earth that had sustained you for generations. Maybe you returned from a forgotten war with a leg that never healed right, making you useless for farm work. Or maybe you just had a run of catastrophically bad luck, a failed crop followed by a sick cow. A downward spiral that ended here, in this damp ruin. The exact reason is lost to the fog of your own misery. All you know is the gnawing, all consuming emptiness in your stomach. It's more than an ache. It's a physical presence. A cold, hard knot that twists and turns. It dictates your every thought, your every action. You spend your days in a desperate, hazy search for anything edible. You've eaten wild roots that scoured your insides, berries that made you sick, and you've even chewed on leather from a discarded shoe, just for the memory of flavor. You've tried begging in the village. At first, you do receive a few scraps, a crust of bread here, a bruised apple there, given more out of pity than charity. But pity is a shallow well, and it runs dry quickly. Soon, the doors were closed before you could even approach. Mothers would pull their children inside, their faces pinched with a mixture of fear and disgust. You are no longer a neighbor in need. You are a blight, a reminder of how close everyone else is to your own fate. Their fear makes them cruel. The worst part is the smell of baking bread that drifts from the baker's cottage in the morning, the scent of roasting meat from the tavern in the evening. These smells are a form of torture, phantom feasts that fill your head with impossible banquets while your stomach eats itself. You are invisible, a ghost haunting the edges of a life you were once a part of. This profound social isolation is a key, and often overlooked, aspect of historical poverty. It wasn't just about the lack of food. It was about the severing of all human bonds. Historians debate whether the communities of the past were more tightly knit or more brutal than our own, but the truth is they were both. A village could be a powerful safety net, but it could also be a ruthless enforcer of its own boundaries. Once you were outside that net, you were truly, terrifyingly alone. You are sitting in your straw pile, shivering, trying to remember the last time you felt properly warm. Your mind is a dull, slow thing, all its energy diverted to the singular, primal command, find food. You close your eyes and try to summon the memory of a full belly, the feeling of sleepy contentment after a good meal, but the memory is faint, like a story someone told you a long time ago. Suddenly, a shadow falls over you. You flinch, expecting a kick, or a stone thrown by a village boy. You curl into a tighter ball, a reflexive, defensive posture. But no kick comes. Are you the one they call the fallen shepherd? A voice asks. It's a low voice, cautious. You slowly, painfully, you uncurl yourself and look up. A man is standing in the doorway of the barn. HES, not a villager you recognize. HES dressed well, in a dark, saber wool coat, the kind worn by a man of some small means, clerk, or a merchant steward. HES looking at you not with disgust, but with a strange, calculating expression. HES not here to chase you away. HES here for a reason. You don't answer. You don't have the energy for words. You just stare, your hungry eyes wide. The man takes a half-minus step closer. He seems to be holding his breath, as if the smell of your poverty is a physical assault. Old man Hemlock, the weaver, is dying, he says, his voice flat. His family seeks a certain service. They are willing to pay. He reaches into a small purse at his belt and pulls something out. He holds it out to you. It's not a coin. It's a small loaf of bread, a real one, dark, dense, and beautiful. The smell of it hits you like a physical blow, and your stomach clenches with a fierce, painful groan. You stare at the bread, mesmerized. It is salvation. It is life. It is everything you want in the world, and as you reach for it, a single, desperate thought burns through the fog of your hunger. I will do anything for that bread. You don't even realize you're on your feet until you feel the strain in your knees. Your body, moving with an instinct faster than thought, lurches towards the man and the bread he holds. Your hand, a thing of bone and dirt, shoots out, trembling, for a glorious second. Your fingers brush against the rough crust. The man snatches it back. The withdrawal is so sudden it feels like a physical blow. A desperate, animal whimper escapes your throat before you can stop it. You freeze, half squelched. Your eyes locked on the loaf now held safely out of your reach. The steward, for that is what he must be, looks at you with an unreadable expression. It isn't cruelty, it's business. The bread is part of the payment, he says, his voice cool and precise. It is earned, not given. He lets the word earned hang in the air. You look from his face to the bread and back again. Your mind, sluggish from starvation, is slowly beginning to piece things together. Old man Himlock, the weaver, a dying man, a service, a payment of bread. The disconnected fragments click into place with a dreadful, final clarity. He is not offering you a job. He is offering you a curse. He wants you to be a sin-eater. The realization lands not with a crash, but with a cold, sinking dread that momentarily eclipses even your hunger. You know the stories. Everyone knows the stories. The sin-eater is a figure of whispered horror. A man so despised he is barely considered human. A man who walks alone, sleeps alone, and will die alone, buried in unhallowed ground at a crossroads with a stake through his heart, to prevent his ghost, heavy with the sins of others, from rising to haunt the living. To accept this offer is to accept a life of total, absolute isolation. It is to be feared, reviled, and spat upon by the very people who might hire you. You stumble back a step, shaking your head. The gesture is feeble, a weak protest against the inevitable. No, you manage to rasp. The word scratching your dry throat, no. The steward watches you, his expression unchanging. He doesn't argue. He doesn't persuade. He simply holds the bread a little more prominently, turning it slightly so the faint light from the broken roof catches the texture of the crust. It is a masterful, silent argument. He is not negotiating with your conscience. He is negotiating with your stomach. Old Hemlock was a weaver. The steward continues, his voice a low, confidential murmur. A good one. But his threads were not always his own. He bought wool he knew to be stolen. He shorted the lengths he sold to the merchants from the city. He coveted his neighbor's wife and cursed his own loom when the thread snapped. The steward's eyes flick towards you. These are not the sins of a murderer. They are small, greasy sins, the kind that stick to a soul and weigh it down. His family wants him to have a clean passing. They are good, God-fearing people. The irony is so thick you could choke on it. They are so God-fearing that they are willing to pay another man to damn himself on their behalf. This outsourcing of spiritual consequence is at the very core of the sin-eater tradition. Historians are fascinated by this particular point. Did the families who hired sin-eaters truly believe the ritual worked? Or was it a form of psychological comfort, a last-ditch effort to assuage their own grief and fear? It's a question with no single answer, likely varying from one desperate family to another. For some, it was deep-seated faith. For others, a kind of superstitious hedging of their bets. Sixpence, the steward says, his voice dropping lower, and a loaf, and a mug of ale. Sixpence. It's a fortune. It's more money than you've seen in a year. It's enough to buy food for a month. Maybe more. Enough to buy a new tunic, a blanket. Enough to feel human again, for a little while. The word hangs in the air, shimmering with possibility. You look around the ruined barn, at the damp straw, the scurrying rats, the relentless, miserable drizzle. This is your life now. A slow, cold, lonely starvation. Is the life of a reviled outcast truly any worse? At least the outcast is fed. At least the outcast has a purpose. Grim though it may be, pure. You have nothing. You are nothing. You are already a ghost. The only difference is, as a sin-eater, you would be a ghost who gets paid. The steward sees the conflict in your eyes. He knows he has won. He is not a monster. He is merely an agent of a monstrous system, a man who understands that desperation is the key that unlocks any door. Slowly, deliberately, he sets the loaf of bread down on a clean patch of stone near the doorway. Then he places 6 gleaming silver coins next to it. He doesn't say another word. He simply looks at you. The choice is yours. Starve with your soul intact, or live with one you sold for 6 coins and a loaf of bread. You look at the food. You look at the money. The gnawing emptiness in your gut makes the decision for you. Your soul feels distant, an abstract concept. The bread is real. The hunger is real. With a deep, shuddering breath that feels like the last gasp of your old life, you take a slow, shuffling step forward. Taking that first step is the hardest thing you have ever done. Each footfall feels heavy, as if you are wading through thick, clinging mud. You are not just walking towards a loaf of bread, you are walking away from yourself. With every inch you move, the man you used to be, William or John, the man with a name and a place, recedes, fading like a dream upon waking. The steward watches you, his face impassive, a silent witness to your quiet damnation. When you reach the stone, you don't snatch the bread. Your movements are slow, almost ceremonial. You kneel down, the rough stone cold and unforgiving against your knees. For a moment, you just look at the offering. The dark, round loaf. The 6 silver coins gleaming dully in the grey light. It is a contract, laid out for you to sign. Your hand reaches for the bread first. The moment your skin touches it, a jolt goes through you. It is real. It is solid. Its weight in your palm is the most reassuring feeling you have had in months. You lift it to your nose and inhale deeply. The smell of baked grain, yes, and life itself fills your senses, and your empty stomach clenches so violently it makes you dizzy. It takes every ounce of your will not to tear into it right here, to devour it like a wild animal. But you know you cannot. This bread is not yet food. It is a tool. It is an unwritten page, waiting to be filled with the weaver's petty sins. You then gather the coins. Their cold weight is small, hard promise in your palm. You tuck them away somewhere deep inside your rags. A secret anchor against the coming storm. You have been paid. Now you must do the work. You get to your feet, cradling the loaf in your hands, and look at the steward. You don't need to speak. Your acceptance is written on your face, in the grim set of your jaw, in the hollows of your eyes. He gives a single, curt nod. "Follow me," he says, and turns, his business here concluded. You follow him out of the ruin of the barn, out into the drizzle. The village, which had seemed so hostile and distant, now feels terrifyingly close. As you walk behind the steward, you pull your ragged tunic tighter, trying to hide your face, to make yourself smaller, but it's no use. You are no longer an anonymous beggar. You are something far worse. A woman shaking a rug out of an upstairs window sees you, and her eyes widen. She doesn't just see a poor man. She sees the steward, and she sees the loaf of bread in your hands, and she understands. She makes a small sign with her fingers to ward off evil and quickly pulls her head back inside, slamming the wooden shutter closed. The rejection is immediate, and it stings more than you expected. This is your new reality. You are a walking taboo. The steward leads you to a small, mere cottage at the edge of the village. The smell of damp woolen dye hangs in the air around it. This is the weaver's house. The steward does not knock. He simply pushes the door open and gestures for you to enter. The scene inside is uncannily familiar. It's the same tableau of quiet, waiting grave you once observed. A low-minded sit-room, a still figure in a bed, a grieving family huddled together. This time, however, you are not the observer in the corner. You are the main actor in this grim little play. You are the figure at the door. A woman, presumably the weaver's wife, looks up as you enter. Her face is a mask of sorrow and fear. She shrinks away from you, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. You keep your eyes fixed on the floor, just as you saw the other Sin-Eater do. It seems to be part of the unspoken etiquette of the profession. You do not meet their gaze. You are a necessary evil, and you must act a part. You shuffle to the bedside. The weaver, old man Hemlock, is a small, bird-minded-like man, lost in a sea of blankets. His breathing is a faint, papery rustle. On his chest, there is an empty space, a space waiting for your loaf of bread. This is the part no one told you about. There is no instruction manual for this. You have to rely on fragmented stories, on half-minded remembered whispers. You know what you must do. You place the loaf of bread on the weaver's chest. Then, you begin to circle the bed. You don't know the words the other Sin-Eater murmured, so you say nothing. You just walk, holding the image of his sins in your mind, the stolen rule, the short measures, the covetous thoughts. You try to feel them leaving his body, imagine them being drawn into the bread. Does it work? Is anything actually happening? Historians, of course, would say no. But in this room, steeped in belief and fear, it feels profoundly real. After 3 circles, you stop. You pick up the bread. It feels heavier now, denser, or is that just your imagination? You look at the bread in your hand. This is the moment. Your first meal. Your first sin. You raise it to your lips. Your throat is tight. Your hand is shaking. You take a bite. The bread tastes of bread. It is coarse and a little stale, but it is the most wonderful thing you have ever tasted. But as you chew, a strange thing happens. An image flashes in your mind. A length of dark blue wool, being cut a few inches short. You swallow, and another image appears. The face of the merchant from the city, his expression rusting unopened, being deceived. You take another bite, and you feel a hot flush of anger. The weaver's anger, at a snapped thread on his loom. It's not real. It can't be. It's just your starved mind. Suggestible and weak. But it feels real. It feels like you are not just eating bread. You are consuming memories. You are eating a life. You finish the loaf, every last crumb, and the steward hands you a mug of ale. You drain it, washing down the phantom feelings, the spectral sins. The weaver gives a soft sigh, and is still. His wife begins to weep quietly. You have done it. You are a Sin-Eater. And as you turn to leave, you feel a new kind of weight inside you. It is not the comforting weight of a full stomach. It is something else entirely. Something cold, and dark, and permanent. You don't go back to the ruined barn. It doesn't feel right. Somehow, that was the hiding place of a beggar, a man waiting to die. You are something else now. You are employed. Cursed. Yes, but employed. With the 6 silver coins pressing against your ribs, a cold, hard reminder of your new status. You walk past the barn and keep going, heading for the woods that border the village. Your old life is over. Your new one, as a professional pariah, has begun. You find a small, natural hollow, a sort of cave formed by the tangled roots of an ancient oak tree. It's not much, but it's dry, and it's hidden. This will be your home now. As you sit there, listening to the rain drip from the leaves above, the reality of your choice begins to settle in. You are no longer William or John. You are now, simply, the Sin-Eater. It's not a name. It's a title, a label that erases everything you were before. It's a brand, seared onto your soul. The next morning, you walk towards the village to buy food. The hunger is gone, replaced by a dull, settled feeling in your stomach. But you know you must be prudent. 6pence is a fortune, but a fortune can be squandered. As you approach the first few cottages, you notice the change immediately. A group of children playing with a hoop in the lane stop dead when they see you. They stare, their mouths agape, before one of them lets out a frightened yelp and they all scatter, running for their homes as if you were a wolf. You keep walking, your eyes fixed on the path ahead. You tell yourself it doesn't matter. You are used to being ignored, but this is different. This isn't ignorance. This is appointed, focused, and fearful recognition. You reach the baker's shop, the source of so many of your recent tortures. The smell of fresh bread is still intoxicating, but now it's mingled with a new, soul scent, your own dread. You push open the door. The baker, a large man with flour-minus dusted arms, is kneading dough on a massive wooden table. He looks up, and his cheerful expression vanishes, replaced by one of alarm and hostility. "What do you want?" he grunts, not as a question, but as a challenge. He wipes his floury hands on his apron, a gesture that feels oddly aggressive. You hold out one of the silver coins. "A loaf," you say, your voice hoarse, "and some cheese, if you have it." The baker stares at the coin in your palm as if it were a venomous spider. He knows whose coin that is. News travels fast in a small village. He knows it came from the weaver's family. He knows it is tainted money, payment for a dark service. He shakes his head, a firm, final gesture. "I've no bread for you." "I can pay," you insist, pushing the coin forward. "It's not about the money," he says, his voice low and high. "It's about what you are. I won't have your kind in my shop. I won't have you touching my bread. Get out." The rejection is a slap in the face. You have money, real money, for the first time in ages, and it's worthless. The very transaction that gave you the means to rejoin the world has simultaneously barred you from it. This social ostracism was absolute. Sin-eaters were often forced to have their food left for them on a stone wall or at a designated spot outside the village. The transaction handled without any human contact, sometimes without even a word exchanged. This unwritten rule is something that many historical accounts touch upon. The profound paradox of the sin-eater is that their function was to purify a household, yet they themselves were seen as permanently unclean. It's a concept that anthropologists call ritual pollution. By taking on the sins, you become a vessel of spiritual contamination, too dangerous to be allowed to participate in the normal exchanges of community life. And right now, you are learning this lesson firsthand from a terrified baker. Dejected, you back out of the shop. You try the butcher, with the same result. He shoos you away with a meat cleaver, his face a mask of superstitious terror. You are radioactive. Your presence contaminates everything you approach. Finally, you find a small, crooked stall at the far end of the market run by an old woman who is nearly blind. She sells shriveled apples and yesterday's eggs. You approach her cautiously. You place your coin on the edge of her stall and point to the things you want. She squints at you, her vision too poor to recognize you for what you are. She just sees a customer. She takes the coin, bites it to ensure it's real, and pushes a small pile of apples and a few precious eggs towards you. You scoop them up and hurry away before anyone can tell her who she just served. This is how it will be from now on, a life of furtive transactions, of seeking out the blind spots in the community, of existing in the cracks. You are not a part of the village anymore. You are a secret that it keeps, a necessary, but shameful, secret. As you walk back to your hollow in the woods, you pass the churchyard. Through the trees, you see a small group of people gathered around a fresh mound of earth, the weaver's funeral. You see his wife, his sons, the steward. You even see the baker who refused to serve you, his head bowed in piety. They are praying for the weaver's soul, a soul they believe you cleansed. They are commending to God a spirit that you, through a dark and forbidden ritual, made pure. And as you stand there in the shadows, an outcast watching the very community you are paid to serve, you feel the full, crushing weight of your new name. Life settles into a strange, monotonous rhythm, dictated by hunger and the deathbeds of strangers. The hollow under the oak tree becomes your entire world. You learn the landscape of its roots, the patterns of moss on the damp earth. You spend your days in a state of quiet, waiting hibernation, waiting for the call. It comes, on average, once every few months. Sometimes, it's a nervous child sent with a message, who shouts the location from a safe distance and then runs. Other times, it's a grim Midas-faced man, a brother or a son, who appears at the edge of your woods and leads you in silence to the house of the dying. You learn to read the signs. A sudden hush in the village. A lantern burning late in a window where it shouldn't be. You are becoming attuned to the rhythms of mortality. With each job, you learn a little more about the grim trade you have stumbled into. The tools are always the same, a trinity of despair. Bread, ale, and salt. The bread is the foundation of it all. It is almost always a coarse, dark loaf, the kind of bread eaten by the poor. There's a practical reason for this. It's cheap. But you start to feel there's a symbolic reason, too. A fine, white, manchet loaf would feel raw, too pure for such a dirty task. This is earthy bread, for earthy sins. It must be placed on the chest of the dying. You learn. Some say it's to be close to the heart, the seat of emotion. Others say it's to be near the mouth, the source of lies and curses. You don't know the reason. You just know the rule. The ale is the second part of the equation. It's usually weak, watery stuff, barely worthy of the name. Its purpose is to wash down the bread, to settle the sins in your gut. After one particularly harrowing ritual, for a man who had been notoriously cruel to his animals, you feel a burning in your stomach all night. You become convinced that the sins are fighting inside you, a churning, indigestible mass. You start to see the ale as more than just a drink. It's a spiritual solvent, necessary to dissolve the solids you've consumed. And then there is the salt. This, you discover, is the most mysterious and debated element of your toolkit. A small pile of salt is always placed on the bread before the ritual begins. You are to heat the bread first, then lick the salt from the plate or from your palm. Why? You ask an old woman once, a bereaved mother who is so lost in her grief that she forgets to be afraid of you. She looks at you with cloudy eyes and whispers, "The salt is to bind them. Bind them." The word sends a chill down your spine. Bind the sins to you. She clarifies, her voice a dry rest, so they cannot escape and wander the earth as ghosts. This interpretation is horrifying. It reframes the salt not as a purifier, but as a form of spiritual glue, ensuring the sins you consume become a permanent part of you. This is one of the great points of contention among the few folklorists who studied the custom. Was the salt for purification, as in Christian tradition, or for preservation, a darker, more pagan idea? Listening to that grieving mother, you have your answer. You are not just eating sins, you are picking them in your own soul. You develop your own small rituals. You have a specific wooden bowl, carved from a noble fallen birch wood, that you carry with you. This is your trencher, your plate. You have a leather flask for the ale, which you insist on filling yourself from the family's cask. You don't trust them not to give you the dregs. Or worse, these small acts of control are all you have in a life that is utterly at the mercy of others. One day, you are called to the bedside of an old woman who lived her whole life in a single minus-room hovel on the common. She was a cunning woman, a teller of fortunes and a healer who used herbs and charms. The village both needed her and feared her, and now that she is dying, they are terrified of the strange, unminus Christian knowledge she possessed. They need her sins eaten, scoured clean. When you arrive, the family, a nervous daughter and her husband, point to the items on the old woman's chest. But instead of a loaf, there is a biscuit. A hard, dry ship's biscuit. It's all we have. The daughter whispers, her eyes wide with fear. For a moment, you consider refusing. The ritual requires bread. But then you look at their desperate faces, and at the still form on the bed, and you see your own past reflected in their poverty. You nod. You perform the ritual with the biscuit. It's hard tack scraping your throat as you swallow it. Does it work? Does the vessel matter? Or is it the intent behind it? You decide it must be the intent. The sins of a cunning woman, small divinations, harmless charms. Perhaps a curse muttered offense minus breaking cow, feel no heavier or lighter than the sins of the weaver. They are just another layer of coal. Dark silt, settling at the bottom of your soul. You are becoming a landfill of human error. A walking testament to the small, sad failures of your neighbors. And your only tools are a loaf of bread, a sip of ale, and a pinch of salt. You learn to live in the strange twilight of your new existence. You are a ghost who walks in daylight. A man everyone sees and no one acknowledges. Your life is a study in paradoxes. You are essential, but unwanted. You are a savior, but you are damned. You are the most intimate confidant of the dead, and a total stranger to the living. Your relationship with the village settles into a silent, functional rhythm. They leave you alone in your wooded hollow, a respectful distance born of fear. In return, you do not trouble them. You don't walk through the village square in the middle of the day. You don't try to speak to anyone unless it is about the business of your trade. You learn to read the boundaries, the invisible lines of exclusion that have been drawn around you. The children are the most honest. They don't have the adult capacity for polite shunning. Their fear is pure and theatrical. If they see you gathering firewood at the edge of the forest, they will stop their games, point, and whisper your name like a curse, the sim minus eater. Then they will run. At first, it felt like a fresh wound every time. Now, it is just part of the landscape, like the call of a crow or the rustle of leaves. It is the sound of your own name. The adults are more subtle. If you are walking down a lane and a villager is approaching, they will suddenly find something fascinating to look at in the hedgerow, or they will cross the muddy track to the other side, their eyes fixed firmly on the horizon until you have passed. It is a masterclass in non-minus acknowledgement. You are there, and you are not there, at the same time. This complete social isolation has a strange effect on you. You begin to forget the sound of your own voice for days at a time. The silence of the woods becomes your primary companion. You start talking to yourself, not out of madness, but just to remember how words feel in your mouth. You have conversations with the oak tree, with the stream where you fetch your water. They are better listeners than the villagers. Anyway, they don't judge. The most bizarre part of your existence is the moment of the call. The transition is always jarring. One moment, you are a complete outcast, a non-minus person. The next, you are the most important man in the world to a single, desperate family. When a son or a daughter comes to fetch you, their face is a mixture of terror and desperate hope. They need you. They hate that they need you, but the need is greater than the hate. You walk to their home, a silent procession of two. They walk ahead, and you follow a few paces behind. No words are exchanged. When you arrive, you are ushered in. The necessary monster. The foul medicine that must be taken. Inside the death minus room. You are the center of attention. Every eye is on you, watching your every move, from the moment you place the bread on the chest to the final swallow of ale. In this small, sacred space, you have a strange kind of power. You are the master of this grim ceremony. But the moment the ritual is over, the moment the final breath is sighed and payment is made, that power vanishes, the switch is flipped. You are once again the outcast, the pariah. You are to be removed from the house as quickly and quietly as possible, like a bloody rag after a surgery. You are the living evidence of a shameful, superstitious act they would rather forget. They need to believe their loved one is in the hands of God now, not that their sins are sloshing around in the belly of a man who lives under a tree. Historians have noted this pattern in the sparse accounts of sin-eaters. They were figures of immense ritual importance for a very brief window of time, bracketed on both sides by total social exclusion. It's a role that exists in many cultures. The ritual specialist who deals with the unclean, whether it's a corpse, a sin, or a social taboo. They are tolerated because they are necessary, but they are never, never embraced. One evening, you are walking back to your hollow after a job. The sin of an old farmer, a man whose life was a litany of land disputes and bad fences, sits heavy in your stomach. As you pass the tavern, the door swings open, spitting light and raucous laughter into the lane. A group of men stumble out, their faces flush with ale. One of them is the farmer's son, the very man who, not an hour ago, had stood with tears in his eyes as you consumed his father's soul. He sees you. His drunken eyes widen, first with recognition, then with a surge of disgust and shame. There he is. He bellows, pointing a trembling finger at you. The girl, the carrion crow. His friends turn and stare. The laughter dies. The air grows cold. Did you enjoy your meal? The sun sneers, his voice thick with drunken bravado. Did my father's sins taste sweet? You say nothing. You just stand there, a shadow in the lane. You know that to speak is to invite violence. Your silence is your only shield. He takes a wobbly step towards you, his face twisted in a drunken mask of grief and rage. He needs someone to blame for his father's death, for his own fear of the afterlife, and you are the perfect target. You are the sin itself, made flesh. Get out of here, he screams, his voice cracking. Go back to your hole in the ground. He stops, picks up a stone, and hurls it at you. It sails past your head and clatters against a wall. His friends, emboldened, do the same. Stones and insults rain down on you. You don't flint. You just turn, and with a slow, deliberate pace, you walk away, back towards the silent welcome of the woods. You are the village's necessary ghost, and ghosts. You are learning. Do not fight back. They just fade away. The calls from the simple cottages and muddy farmsteads continue their grim, sporadic pattern. But one day, a different kind of summons arrives. It is not a frightened child or a grim minus-faced farmer. It is a man on horseback, aim and rest in fight, dark livery, with a face that is cold, professional, and entirely devoid of the superstitious fear you are used to. He doesn't shout from a distance. He rides right up to the edge of your clearing, his horse snorting and stamping impatiently. You are the man they call the Sin Minus Eater, he asks. His voice is crisp, educated. He looks at you not as a monster, but as a tradesman one might hire to unblock a drain. You give a slow nod, your eyes on the silver buckle of his boot. My master, the lord of the manor, is dying, the servant says. He's torn flat. He requires your services. You will be well compensated. He doesn't wait for an answer. He simply turns his horse. Follow me. You have never been to the manor house before. It sits on a hill overlooking the village, a great, brooding beast of stone and timber, separated from the common world by a high wall. To you, and to everyone else in the village, it is another world, a place of unimaginable wealth and power. The idea of entering it is both terrifying and strangely exhilarating. As you follow the servant on horseback through the imposing gates, you feel as though you are crossing a border into another country. The muddy lanes of the village give way to a neat, grave-lit doctor. The chaotic squalor of the cottages is replaced by manicured lawns and ornamental gardens. Even in the grey damp of the season, everything is ordered, controlled, and clean. The servant leads you not to the grand front entrance, but to a small, unassuming door at the back. A tradesman's entrance, even in this. The hierarchy is maintained. You are here to perform a service, not as a guest. The inside of the house is a labyrinth of dark wood paneling, thick tapestries that swallow all sound, and the faint, pervasive scent of beeswax and old money. The air is still and heavy, but it's a different kind of stillness from the cottages. This is the silence of power, of unspoken rules and generations of decorum. You are led up a winding staircase, your bare feet silent on the thick, plush runner. You pass portraits of stern minus-faced ancestors, their painted eyes seeming to follow you with disapproval. They know you don't belong here. The master's bedroom is vast, huge, From a bed draped in heavy velvet curtains dominates the space. A fire crackles in a stone fireplace large enough to roast an ox. The air is warm and smells of expensive foreign medicines and spiced wine. This is a world away from the cold, damp rooms you are used to. But at the center of it all is the same universal scene. A small, frail figure lost in a sea of bedding, his breath coming in shallow, labored gasps. A woman, presumably the lady of the manor, stands by the window, her back to the room. She is a statue carved from grief and silk. She does not turn when you enter. A man, probably the heir, stands by the fireplace, his face a mask of bored impatience. He looks at you with a flicker of detached curiosity, the way one might look at a strange insect. On the dying lord's chest, resting on a silver plate, is a slice of bread. But this is not the coarse, dark loaf you are used to. It is a slice of the finest, whitest bread, a manchet loaf made from sifted flour, and beside it is not a pile of rough salt, but a small, gleaming mound of refined, crystalline salt. And on the bedside table, in a crystal goblet, is a dark, red wine, not ale. The tools are different. Does that mean the sins are different too? You begin your ritual. You place the fine white bread on the Lord's chest. As you begin your slow, circling walk around the vast bed, you try to imagine his sins. They are not the simple, grubby sins of the villagers. A farmer covets his neighbor's pig. A lord covets his neighbor's land, and has the power to take it. A baker cheats a customer out of a few ounces of flour. A lord cheats an entire village out of their common grazing rights by moving a fence in the dead of night. The sins of the powerful, you realize, are on a different scale. They have more imagination. The sin of pride, of believing you are better than other men. The sin of wrath, not as a shouted curse, but as a quiet order that sends a man to the stocks. The sin of greed, not for a loaf of bread, but for a forest, a river, a mine. How can a single slice of bread, even a fine white one, possibly absorb all of this? This is a point that some revisionist historians have raised. They question whether the sin minus eater was a custom exclusively of the poor, while the most famous accounts, like that of Richard Munso, are rooted in rural poverty. There are tantalizing hints and whispers in old letters and diaries of similar rituals being performed in secret by the wealthy. It makes a certain kind of sense. The rich, after all, had more to account for, and more money to pay for a spiritual loophole. You complete your circles. You pick up the white bread. It feels impossibly light, as if it is hollow. You take a bite. It is soft, almost melting in your mouth. But as you swallow, the phantom images that flash in your mind are more potent, more chilling than any you have experienced before. You see the face of a tenant farmer, begging for mercy. You see him up, and a boundary line being deliberately redrawn. You feel a cold, dismissive wave of a hand, a gesture that ruins a man's life. You eat the entire slice, and drink the rich, dark wine. The wine feels like blood in your mouth, heavy and metallic. When you are done, the heir steps forward. He doesn't hand you a few coins. He drops a small, heavy purse onto the floor at your feet. It lands with a solid, clinking thud. You pick it up. It is filled with silver shillings, more money than you have ever dreamed of. A lifetime's worth of sins for a lifetime's worth of wages. As the servant leads you out, you glance back. The lady is still at the window. The heir is already looking through his father's papers. The great man is dead. The machine of power moves on without him. And you, the sin minus eater, are walking away with a belly full of ambition, cruelty, and cold, calculated greed. This meal, you suspect, will be much harder to digest. The heavy purse of shillings is a secret you keep buried under a loose stone at the back of your hollow. It feels dangerous, like a cursed treasure. You don't spend it, The fear of drawing attention to yourself is greater than the desire for comfort. So you continue your life as before, living on the furtive purchases you can make from the nearly blind woman at the market, a ghost with a hidden hoard of silver. The memory of the manor house, with its fine bread and blood minus dark wine, begins to feel like a strange dream. The sins of the rich were complex and cold. Like a well-minus crafted legal document, they were sins of the mind. The next call you receive brings you crashing back to the familiar world of simple, desperate sins, sins of the flesh and the heart. It is a message from the baker, the same baker who threw you out of his shop, his face a mask of righteous fury. The message is not delivered by him. Of course, it is brought by his young apprentice, a boy of about 12, who stands at the edge of the woods and yells, "My master's wife is dying." He says to come. The boy's voice is a mixture of fear of you and fear of his master. You walk to the village, your mind a swirl of confusion and bitter irony. The baker, the man who would not let you touch his bread for fear of contamination, is now inviting you into the heart of his home to perform your unclean ritual. Desperation, it seems, is the ultimate solvent of piety. When you arrive at the bakery, the door is ajar. The familiar, wonderful smell of baking bread is absent. The air is still and smells of stale yeast and sickness. The baker is sitting on a stool by the cold oven, his large frame slumped in defeat. His face is not angry now. It is just broken. He looks up at you, and for the first time, he meets your eye. In his gaze, you see not hatred, but a desperate, pleading shame. He doesn't say a word. He just jerks his head towards the small room behind the shop. The room is tiny, immaculately clean, but stuffy. The baker's wife lies in a small bed, her face pale and waxy. She was a woman known for her kindness, for slipping extra buns to the children and for having a gentle word for everyone. It's hard to imagine what sins could possibly weigh on her soul. On her chest, on a simple wooden plate, is a piece of bread. It is a small, perfectly formed white roll, the kind the baker sells to the vicar for his Sunday table. It is an offering of the best he has. Beside it is a pile of salt in a mug of what looks like fresh, sweet milk, not ale. The baker stays in the main room, his head in his hands. You are alone with his dying wife. You place the roll on her chest, and as your hand brushes against the blanket, her eyes flicker open. They are cloudy, but they seem to focus on you. "Thank you," she whispers, her voice a thread of sound, and then she closes her eyes again. Her gratitude is more unsettling than any curse. It makes this feel different, personal. You begin your slow circles around the bed. What are her sins? You try to imagine them. Perhaps she once gave a short measure of flour when the stores were low, to ensure her own family wouldn't go hungry. A sin born of love. Perhaps she told a white lie to a neighbor, a small untruth to keep the peace. A sin born of kindness. Perhaps, in a moment of exhaustion, she had a flash of resentment for her demanding life, a sin of being merely human. These are not the grand, structural sins of the Lord, nor the grubby, angry sins of the farmer. These are the sins of a good person trying to survive in a hard world. They feel lighter, more fragile. There's a little minus discussed theory among some social historians that the type of sinners in Minas Eater was thought to consume was often directly related to the deceased's social standing and profession. A blacksmith's sins were of iron and anger, a merchant's of gold and deceit, a farmer's of earth and envy. The baker's wife, a domestic, nurturing figure, would therefore have sins related to her role. Sins of the heart. The larger, in the heart. It suggests that the community had a very clear, if unwritten, taxonomy of transgression. You complete the ritual. You pick up the small, soft roll. It feels warm in your hand. You take a bite. It tastes sweet and light. There are no jarring images, no flashes of anger or greed. Instead, you feel a faint, lingering sense of regret. A soft, grey sadness, the feeling of a promise not kept, a word left unsaid. It's the quiet, heartbreaking weight of an ordinary life, with all its small compromises and gentle failures. You eat the entire roll, and you lick the salt, then you drink the milk. It is cool and sweet, and it feels clean in your mouth. It doesn't feel like it's washing down sins. It feels like a comfort. When you are finished, you walk back into the main room. The baker is still sitting by the cold oven. He has not moved. On the table, he has left your payment. It is not a handful of coins. It is a large, beautiful loaf of fresh, dark bread, and a whole round of cheese. It is a king's ransom in food. It is a payment from one tradesman to another, an acknowledgement of a service rendered. It is a thank you, and an apology, all in one. You pick up the bread and cheese. The baker does not look at you, but as you turn to leave, you hear him say, his voice thick and muffled, "God have mercy on you." It's the first time anyone has offered you a blessing, and as you walk back to your hollow, carrying the baker's bread, you are not sure if that makes the weight in your soul heavier, or, for the first time, just a little bit lighter. The seasons turn. The coins from the lord of the manor remain buried, a cold secret in the earth. The baker's loaf is long gone, but the memory of it, and the milk, and his strange, desperate blessing, lingers. You continue your trade. A turner, a weaver, a shepherd. With each ritual, another layer of salt is added to the growing delta of sin inside you, and a strange thing begins to happen. You start to get confused. You're sitting by your stream one afternoon, watching the water flow over the smooth stones. You're trying to remember a song your mother used to sing. You can recall the melody, a simple, lilting tune, but the words are gone. Instead of the words about a shepherd and his flock, your mind serves up a fragment of a different memory, the feeling of a hot flush of rage as a thread snaps on a loom. You shake your head, trying to clear it. That wasn't your rage. That was Old Man Hemlock, the weaver, your first sin, but the memory feels vivid, personal. It has the texture of your own experience. This blurring of identities becomes more frequent. One day, you catch a fish in the stream, a small, silvery trout. As you gut it with your knife, you feel a sudden, sharp pang of guilt, a sense of profound cruelty towards a living creature. But it's not your guilt. It's the guilt of the farmer who was notoriously cruel to his dogs. A guilt you consumed months ago. It rises in you, unbidden and potent, and for a moment, you feel sick to your stomach. You are becoming a library of other people's feelings. Your own emotional landscape is being overgrown by the weeds of their transgressions. Did you always have a fear of the dark? Or did that come from the old woman who died alone in her hovel? Is this streak of melancholy that settles on you in the evenings your own? Or does it belong to the baker's wife, with her quiet, gentle regrets? It's a psychological burden that no historical account could ever properly document. The chronicles and focus its notes can tell us about the ritual, the payment, the social ostracism, but they cannot tell us what it felt like to be the vessel, to have your own personality, your own sense of self, slowly eroded and overwritten by the lives of others. This is a topic that historians can only speculate on, using the tools of psychology and empathy. Was it a slow descent into madness? Or did sin-eaters develop a kind of psychological callus, a way of keeping the consumed sins separate from their own identity? You try to fight it. You try to hold on to yourself. You sit in your hollow and you recite the details of your own life. My name was William. You whisper into the dark. My father was a farmer. I had a sister named Agnes. I once fell from an apple tree and broke my arm. You cling to these small, simple facts as if they were a lifeline. But even they are starting to feel distant. Like a story you read in a book. The memories of the sins you've eaten are fresher, more vivid. They have the sharp, metallic tang of reality, while your own past is fading to a watercolor gray. One night, the call comes for a man you knew, a man named Peter, who was once your friend, before your fall from grace. You and he had worked the fields together, shared ale at the tavern. He was a good man, but with a weakness for gambling, always losing his meagre wages on games of chance. You perform the ritual for him. Your heart a cold, hard stone in your chest. You eat the bread from his still body. And as you do, you are flooded not with images, but with feelings. The dizzying, hopeful rush of a winning streak. The sick, plunging despair of a loss. The shame of facing his wife with empty pockets. The lie he told her about where the money went. You swallow the last of it, and it feels like you have swallowed your own past. The memory of your friendship with Peter is now tainted, overlaid with the secret shame you've just consumed. When you remember laughing with him in the tavern, you now also remember the lie he was telling his wife at that very moment. Your own memories are no longer pure. They have been contaminated by the truth of his. You stumble back to your hollow in a daze. You feel heavy, not just with sin, but with the sheer volume of lives you now contain. You are a crowd, a chorus of discordant, whispering souls, all trapped inside your head. You press your hands to your temples, trying to quiet the noise. You are no longer just the sin minus eater. You are the weaver, the farmer, the lord, the baker's wife, and now your old friend. Peter, your own identity. The man named William who liked the sound of his mother's singing is just one small voice in the crowd, and it is getting harder and harder to hear him. The weight in your soul is not just the weight of sin. It is the weight of everyone else. The local vicar, Father Thomas, had always been a source of quiet hostility. He is a young man, fervent and newly assigned to this small, backwoods parish, full of ideals forged in a seminary far from the realities of village life. He sees your existence not just as a folk custom, but as a personal affront, a direct challenge to his authority and the authority of the church. He preaches against you from his pulpit, calling the ritual a devil's mockery and a pagan blasphemy. The villagers listen, nod piously, and then call for you anyway when death comes knocking. They are hedging their bets, seeking comfort from both God and the old ways. One crisp autumn afternoon, as you are gathering fallen branches for your fire, he confronts you directly. He doesn't send a messenger. He comes himself, striding into your clearing with a righteous fire in his eyes. His black cassock a stark slash against the golds and browns of the woods. He is holding a heavy, leather-bound Bible, and he wields it less like a book and more like a weapon. Demon, he spits, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. He stops a safe distance from you, as if you might leap at him. Do you know what it is you do? You perform a vile parody of the most sacred rite. You take bread, the symbol of the Lord's body, and you turn it into a vessel for filth. You say nothing. You simply lean on the pile of branches you've gathered. Your silence an infuriating counterpoint to his righteous anger. Confession, he continues, his voice rising. Absolution, the Holy Eucharist. These are the tools God has given us to cleanse the soul. They are administered by his ordained servants, not by a wretch living in a hole in the ground. His outrage is, from his perspective, entirely justified. This is a classic point of conflict that historians see throughout history. The official, institutionalized religion clashing with the persistent, deeply minus-rooted folk beliefs of the common people. The church claimed a monopoly on salvation. The sin minus eater was, in essence, an illegal, unregulated competitor. He was offering a service, peace of mind for the dying, that the church believed only it had the right to provide. The fact that the service was so grim and its practitioners so reviled was, in a way, irrelevant. It was the principle of it. You offer them a false hope, Father Thomas says, his voice taking on a more pleading, pastoral tone. He is trying to save your soul now, as well as protect his flock. You cannot take their sins. It is a trick of the mind, a superstition. You are damning yourself for nothing, for a few coins and a crust of bread. You forfeit your immortal soul in a meaningless charade. You look at him, And for the first time, you feel a flicker of something other than resignation. It is a spark of defiance. He speaks of abstract theology, of doctrines and rites. You live in the world of tangible fear. You have seen the terror in the eyes of the dying, and the profound, visible relief that settles on them after you have performed your meaningless charade. He offers a promise of salvation in the next world. You offer a moment of peace in this one. Their fear is real, you say, your voice alone. Rough rostrum disuse. The sound of it surprises you both. The vicar flinches, as if your words themselves carry a contagion. It is a fear born of ignorance, a fear earned trying to light with the candle of Christ. Your candle doesn't always reach the darkest corners. You reply, the words coming from some deep, forgotten part of yourself. They are afraid of dying with a curse on their lips, or a debt unpaid. Small things they are too ashamed to tell a priest. Perhaps this idea that the sin minor seater dealt with the small sins that people were too embarrassed to confess to a priest is a fascinating theory that some scholars support. The formal confession could be an intimidating process. Admitting to a priest that you'd cheated your neighbor might have real minus world consequences. But the sin minor seater was a silent, anonymous vessel. He required no verbal confession. The sins were transferred through the bread, a quiet, secret transaction. He was a spiritual suspect, not a judge. The vicar's face hardens again. He is losing the argument, and he knows it. He falls back on dogma. You are a practitioner of witchcraft, a charlatan who preys on the fears of the simple. You are leading these poor souls astray, and you are paving your own path to hellfire. He takes a step closer, his knuckles white as he grips his Bible. Renounce this evil, repent, come to the church, confess your sins, all of them, the ones you have eaten, the ones that are your own, and I will pray for you. I will help you. You look at him, at his clean robes, his well-fed face, his passionate, unwavering certainty. He lives in a world of black and white, of God and the devil. You live in the grey, muddy, complicated world of human fear. How could you possibly confess the sins you carry? How could you explain the memory of the weaver's rage, or the Lord's cold ambition, or the baker's wife's gentle regret? They are not just sins anymore. They are a part of you. You slowly shake your head, not in defiance, but in sadness. He cannot understand. Then you are lost. The vicar whispers, his face falling. He looks at you now not with anger, but with a profound pity. The way one might look at a leper. He makes the sign of the cross in the air between you, a shield against your corruption. Then he turns and walks away, his black cassock disappearing into the trees, leaving you alone once more in the quiet, complicated, and godless sanctity of your woods. The confrontation with the vicar leaves a strange residue in your soul. His words, "You are damning yourself for nothing," echo in the quiet moments. You had never considered the possibility that the ritual was a lie. To you, the weight in your gut, the confusing tangle of other people's memories, was proof enough. But the vicar's certainty has planted a seed of doubt. Is it all in your head? Are you just a fool, starving and deluding yourself for a meal? This question haunts you as you receive your next call. It is to a remote farmstead, nestled deep in a forested valley, a place that feels older and wilder than the village. The farm belongs to a man named Silas, a charcoal burner. He is a brooding, silent man, feared even by the villagers for his violent temper and his solitary ways. They say he talks to the trees more than to people. They say his fire pits, deep in the woods, are places of dark deeds. The summons is brought by his wife, a thin, terrified woman with old fear in her eyes. "He is dying," she says, her voice barely a whisper, refusing to meet your gaze. He has things on his soul. He cannot rest. You follow her to the farm. The air is thick with the acrid smoke of charcoal. The house is little more than a hut, dark and filled with shadows. Silas is laid out on a crude bed, a giant of a man. Even in sickness, he is great. Hairy arms lie limp at his sides. His breath is a low, guttural rattle, like stones grinding together. This is a man who has lived a hard, brutal life. His wife gestures to his chest. The loaf is there, a lump of black bread, as dark as the charcoal her husband makes. Beside it is a cracked cup of what looks like rough cider. There is no salt. He would not have it. She stammers when you look for it. He said salt was for preservation. He wants his sins to be consumed, to be gone. This is a new and disturbing variation on the ritual. The absence of the salt. The element you believed bound the sins to you is unnerving. Does he want you to simply process them, to act as a temporary filter? Or is it something else? The lack of a key ingredient makes the whole ceremony feel unstable, unpredictable. You begin your circles. The air in the hut is oppressive, charged with a palpable sense of menace. You try to imagine the sins of this man. They are not the neat, intellectual sins of the Lord or the pathetic, desperate sins of the poor. You imagine they are sins of violence. A poacher caught in his woods, dealt with silently and left where he fell. A rival charcoal burner's killed, sabotaged in the night. Cruelty to his wife, his animals, to himself. These are primal, ugly sins, born of rage and isolation. You complete your 3 circles and pick up the black bread. It feels cold and dead in your hand. You hesitate. For the first time, you are afraid, not of the social shunning, not of the damnation, but of the sin itself. You feel a deep, instinctual revulsion. Something in you is screaming not to eat this bread. This is a scenario that the scattered historical sources don't really address. What happened if a sin minus eater refused? Was there a penalty? Was it even conceivable? The desperation that drove men to this profession suggests refusal was a luxury they couldn't afford. But what if the sin was too great, too terrible to contemplate consuming? Could you simply say no? You look at the dying man. His eyes are open, just lids, but they are fixed on you. There is no fear in them. There is a challenge, a dark, knowing glint that says, "Go on, eat it. Eat what I have done." You look at his wife, cowering in the corner. Her face is a plea. She needs him to die in peace, perhaps so that his ghost will not linger to haunt this lonely place. She needs you to do this. And you think of the vicar, a meaningless charade. If it is meaningless, what is there to fear? It is just bread. Dry, black bread. A meal. You close your eyes and you take a bite. The taste is vile. It's not the bread itself, it's the sensation that comes with it. A wave of pure, undiluted malice washes over you. It is a cold, hateful rage that is utterly devoid of passion. It is the joy of causing pain. An image flashes in your mind. A man's face, his eyes wide with terror, his mouth open in a silent scream. Then another, the feeling of a heavy club connecting with something soft, a thrill of savage, triumphant power. You recoil, pulling the bread from your mouth. You want to spit it out, to vomit. The sin is a poison, and you can feel it spreading through you, cold and sharp. You can't do this. You can't take this into yourself. It is too foul, too inhuman. You look at Silas. A faint, terrible smile seems to be playing on his lips. He knows. He knows what he's asking you to consume. He's not seeking peace. He's trying to pass on his evil, to ensure it doesn't die with him. He is using you not as a purifier, but as a vessel for his legacy of hate. You stand there, the half-minus eaten bread in your hand, your body trembling. You are trapped. If you refuse, you break the contract. You admit that the ritual is real, that the sins have power. You prove the vicar wrong and yourself damned. If you continue, you take this thing into yourself. A darkness so profound it might extinguish the last flicker of your own soul. You look at the uniton piece of black bread in your hand. It is no longer food. It is a choice, and for the first time, you are not sure if you have the strength to make it. The silence in the charcoal burner's hut stretches, pulled taut by your hesitation. The half-minus eaten loaf in your hand feels heavier than a millstone. The malevolent glee in Silas's eyes hold you hostage. His wife watches, her breath held, her fear a tangible presence in the smoky air. Your mind is a frantic whirl. You cannot swallow what you have bitten off, but you cannot spit it out. Then, a memory surfaces, not a sin you have eaten, but a story you have heard. It was from a wandering peddler, a man who traveled the remote hill country in the borderlands, a man who traded in news and gossip as much as in needles and thread. You had shared a fire with him one night, deep in the woods, far from the village. He was not afraid of you. He had seen too much of the world to be scared of local ghosts. Recognizing your trade, he had shared a piece of traveler's lore. You are not the only one, he had said, his face illuminated by the flickering flames. The custom is not just of this valley or this county. I have seen it in the high valleys of Wales, where the mountains are old and the people are older. They have their CW and Anwen, their spectral hounds that hunt the souls of the dead. And they have men who do what you do. He described their version of the ritual. It was slightly different. The sin-minus eater, he said, was called a defacid, literally, the eater of that which is. He told you that in some Welsh villages. The ritual was more formal. The sin-minus eater would be given a specific type of wooden bowl, passed down from one to the next, and a special stool to sit on. He was still an outcast, but an outcast with a recognized, almost official, place in the order of things. And it's not just in Wales. The peddler had continued, warming to his theme, in the highlands, to the north, in the mountains where sheep outnumber men. They have their own ways. I heard a tale of a woman, a sin-minus eater, who would not take bread, but a bowl of porridge, into which the dying would whisper their final confession. This idea, that the tradition was not just an isolated English quirk, but a more widespread phenomenon, is one that fascinates folklorists. They trace the threads of these scapegoat rituals across different cultures and geographies, from the ancient Hebrews leading a goat into the wilderness, to these scattered, persistent folk customs in the Celtic fringes of Britain. The details change: bread for porridge, ale for cider, salt or no salt, but the core idea remains the same. Sin is a burden that can be magically transferred to another. The existence of these parallel traditions suggests a deep, ancient truth, a shared human anxiety about death and judgment that predates the neat theology of the parish church. The peddler's story comes back to you now, in this dark hut, with this terrible choice in your hand. You are not alone. Others have faced this. Others have stood at the bedside of monsters and been asked to consume their monstrosity. The thought doesn't make you feel better, exactly, but it makes you feel less singular, less isolated in your dilemma. You are part of a secret, scattered brotherhood of the damned. What would they do? What would the Welshman with his inherited bowl do? Or the mountain woman with her porridge? Would they refuse? Probably not. Refusal was not part of the job description. The job was to eat. The job was to take what was given. You look from the bread to Silas's face. His faint, cruel smile is still there. He is waiting for you to tell, and in that moment, your fear hardens into something else, a cold, stubborn resolve. He wants to see you break. He wants to pass his evil on, to contaminate you with his hateful life. You will not give him the satisfaction. You will not become him. You will simply contain him. You will be his prison, not his successor. With a deep, steadying breath, you raise the black bread to your lips once more. You do not think. You do not feel. You act. You force yourself to chew, to swallow. You take another bite, and another, until the entire hateful loaf is gone. The images and feelings that come with it are foul. A tide of black, cold sludge. You feel the ghost of his fist clenching, the echo of his cruel laughter. You roll it off. You imagine building a stone wall inside your soul, a small, dark cell, and you shove the charcoal burner's sins into it. Or listen, you lock the door and throw away the key. It is a desperate act of mental self-preservation. It is a lie you tell yourself, but it is a necessary one. You drain the cup of cider, washing down the last of it. You can feel it sitting in your gut, a cold, heavy lump. It is different from the other sins. It is not a layer of silt. It is a stone. You turn and walk out of the hut, not waiting for payment. The terrified wife scurries after you and presses a few coins into your hand. You don't even look at them. You just walk away, leaving the charcoal burner to die alone with his empty soul. As you walk back through the woods, you feel the stone inside you. The peddler was right. You are not alone, but the shared burden doesn't make it lighter. It just makes the world seem like a much, much darker place. The stone of the charcoal burner's sin sits dormant in your gut. A cold, heavy presence you learn to live around. Life continues its grim rhythm. But the next summons you receive presents a new and exquisitely painful kind of challenge. It is not the scale of the sin that tortures you this time, but the utter absence of it. The call is for a young woman named Mary. She was a dairy maid, known in the village for a quiet disposition to smile as sweet as the milk she carried. She died suddenly, of a swift and brutal fever that swept through the village, taking the young and the old alike. Her death was a tragedy, a sharp, senseless blow that left her family reeling. You knew her. In the distant way you knew everyone. You would see her in the mornings, walking with her pails, and she was one of the few who didn't cross the road to avoid you. She wouldn't meet your eye, but she wouldn't flee either. A small, almost imperceptible act of non-minus rejection that you had cherished. Her father, a grim, good-minus-fearing farmer, meets you at the door. His eyes are red-minus-rimmed with weeping, but his face is set like granite. She must be pure, he says, his voice a low, raw command. She was a good girl, but the Lord is just. There may be small things, a moment of vanity, an unkind thought. I will not have her face her maker with any stain, no matter how small. He is a man terrified by his own rigid faith. He believes in a God who keeps a meticulous ledger, and he is desperate to ensure his daughter's account is clear. He needs you to scrub away any final, invisible specks. You enter the small, tidy room. Mary is laid out on the bed, looking like a pale, sleeping child. Her mother sits in a corner, weeping silently into her apron. The air is thick with a grief that is so pure and sharp it feels like a physical pain. On Mary's chest, on a clean linen cloth, is a small, white bread roll. A single, perfect teardrop with salt rests upon it. You begin the ritual, your heart a leaden weight. As you circle the bed, you try to imagine her sins, as her father commanded. A moment of vanity. Perhaps she smiled at her own reflection in a pail of water. An unkind thought. Maybe she felt a flicker of annoyance at a demanding customer. These are not sins. They are the texture of being alive. The idea of consuming them feels like a violation, a desecration of her memory. This is the absurd, tragic extension of the sin-eater's role. It wasn't just for the wicked. It was for the virtuous, too. It became a kind of spiritual insurance policy, a final check to ensure that even the purest souls were not tripped up by some forgotten, minor transgression on their way to paradise. This is a facet of the custom that historians find particularly poignant. It speaks to the profound anxiety on death of the age, a time when salvation felt fragile and easily lost. You complete your circles and pick up the roll. It is light as air in your hand. You look at the girl's peaceful face. You know, with a certainty that transcends logic, that she is innocent. There is nothing here to eat. The bread on her chest has absorbed nothing. Because there was nothing to absorb. You are being asked to eat a lie, to participate in a fiction driven by a father's grief and fear. You take a bite of the bread. It tastes only of flour and yeast. You wait for the flash of memory, the phantom emotion. Nothing comes. There is no anger, no greed, no regret. There is only a profound, hollow emptiness. You are eating bread, and nothing more. But you have to perform. The Father is watching, his desperate eyes fixed on you, willingness to be real. So you act the part. You chew slowly, as if contemplating the weight of what you're consuming. You close your eyes, feigning a moment of spiritual burden. It feels like the worst kind of deceit. You are not taking on sin. You are profiting from a Father's love. You finish the roll, lick the single, symbolic grain of salt, and drink the milk they have left for you. As you do, a new kind of weight settles in you. It is not the cold stone of the charcoal burner's malice. It is the heavy, towing weight of your own fraudulence. This, in its own way, is the worst meal you have ever eaten. The sins of the wicked were honest. This meal is a lie, and the lie becomes a sin of your own. You have taken a pure, clean vessel and sullied it with your performance. The Father presses a few coins into your hand, his own hand trembling with gratitude. "Thank you," he whispers. "Thank you. Now I know she is safe." His relief is a knife in your gut. You have given him comfort, but the comfort is built on a foundation of deception. You have taken his money for a service that was not, and could not, be rendered. You walk away from that house of grief feeling more unclean than ever before. The sins of others, you could compartmentalize. You could lock them in a cell in your soul. But this sin, this act of feigned consumption, is entirely your own. It is not a stone you can wall off. It is a poison that dissolves into your own being, tainting the very essence of you. You had thought your job was to eat the sins of others. You are only now realizing that the job itself, the very act of being a sin minus eater, is the greatest sin of all, and it is one that you have to swallow, day after day. The lie of Mary's innocence sits uneasily beside the stone of Silas's malice in the crowded space of your soul. You feel like a badly packed bag, full of sharp minus-edged objects and fragile things, all jumbled together. The purse of the Lord's silver remains buried, a distant memory of a different kind of sin. Your life is a patchwork of other people's endings, and you are beginning to feel frayed at the seams. The next call comes from a family you don't know, from a neighboring hamlet a few miles away. Their reputation has preceded them. They are a mean, grasping family of pig farmers, known for driving a hard bargain in for a clannish suspicion of all outsiders. The summons itself is grudging, brought by a sullen minus-faced youth who offers no name, only a location, and glares at you as if you were trying to cheat him out of air. You make the long walk to their farm. It is a squalid place, thick with the smell of mud and pigs. The farmhouse is small and dilapidated, leaning to one side as if exhausted. The patriarch of the family, the old father, is dying. You are led into a grim, airless room by his two sons, both of whom had the same narrow, suspicious eyes as the youth who summoned you. The old man on the bed is a shrunken, scowling figure. Even at death's door, his face is a mask of pure avarice. You can feel the grasping nature of his soul from across the room. On his chest is the usual loaf, coarsened up, and a smear of salt. The sons watch you with undisguised hostility. There is no grief in their eyes. There is only impatience under cold, calculating greed. They are not here to ensure their father's peaceful passage. They are here to make sure a deal is concluded. They see this not as a sacred ritual, but as a necessary, if distasteful, piece of spiritual housekeeping before they can get down to the real business of inheriting the pigs. You perform the ritual. You do not need to imagine the sins. You can feel them radiating from the old man, from his sons, from the very walls of the house. A lifetime of cheating, of lying, of starving his animals to save a penny, of turning away a beggar in the snow. The sins are petty, numerous, and have the greasy, suffocating quality of rancid fat. This particular type of sin, avarice, was considered one of the deadliest by the church, but it was also one of the most common. In a world of subsistence and scarcity, the line between prudent saving and sinful hoarding was a thin and blurry one. The anxiety around was immense. And it's likely that many of the sin-eater's clients were men like this, terrified that their lifelong habit of penny-pinching had damned them. You circle the bed, your feet sticking to the filthy floor. You pick up the bread. It feels dense and oily. You eat it. It is a meal of pure, unadulterated greed. You feel the phantom thrill of an extra coin in the purse, the sour satisfaction of getting the better of someone in a deal. It's a miserable, fearful set of emotions. You wash it down with the foul tasting ale they provide. The old man dies. His sons exchange a quick, knowing glance. Their wait is over. You turn to them, holding out your hand for the customary payment. The standard fee is a few pence. Perhaps 6pence if the family is well minus off. The elder son looks at your outstretched hand and then smirks. A nasty, humorous expression. "What for?" he asks. You stare at him, confused. "The payment," you say. "The fee for the service." "What service?" the son replies, folding his thick arms across his chest. "You came in here and you ate a piece of our bread and drank a mug of our ale. It seems to me we have given you a free meal. You should be thanking us." You are stunned into silence. This has never happened before. The payment is the cornerstone of the entire transaction. It is what makes it a job, not a curse you take on for free. The money is symbolic. It completes the contract. Without it, the ritual is broken. "I have taken his sins," you say, your voice slow and dangerous. "I did the work. You must pay the fee." "Sims," the younger son scoffs, laughing a high, unpleasant laugh. "Do you really believe that nonsense? You think you ate his Sims? You ate bread, you old fool. We just wanted to be sure, to follow the custom, but pay for it. Pay a ghoul like you for a mouthful of food? I don't think so. They are playing a cruel game. They used the tradition to soothe whatever sliver of superstitious fear they possessed, but their inherent greed is a much stronger force. They refuse to part with even a single penny. The utter powerlessness of your position crashes down on you. What can you do? You cannot appeal to the village elders. They would side with the family. You cannot appeal to the vicar. He believes your work is evil anyway. You are an outcast, an unminus person with no rights and no recourse. You have taken on the soul of a miser, a man who lived his life refusing to pay his debts, and now his sons, in a final, fitting act of tribute to their father's memory, are refusing to pay you. You have been cheated. You are left with the damnation, but without the desperately needed compensation. You look at their hard, pitiless faces, and you know there is no arguing. You have been used and discarded. You turn and walk out of the house, the taste of ashes and deceit in your mouth. You feel the weight of the old man's greasy sins in your belly. An unpaid minus for burden. It is the ultimate violation of your strange, grim profession. You are not just a sin-eater anymore. You are a victim of theft. Your very soul the stolen property. You stumble away from the pig farm in a state of cold fury. Being cheated feels worse than being reviled. The revulsion of the villagers is something you understand. It is part of the contract. This, however, was a betrayal of the contract itself. The weight of the miser's unpaid minus for sins feels particularly foul. A greasy knot in your gut that won't dissolve. You feel a profound and bitter loneliness. The sense that you are utterly adrift in a cruel and faithless world. In the weeks that follow, you retreat even further into yourself. You avoid the village entirely, surviving on the fish you can catch and the roots you can dig. The world has proven itself to be a place of casual, brutal exploitation, and you want no part of it. The memory of the cheating sons festers, a symbol of your own wretched powerlessness. It is during this period of bleak isolation that you hear the whispers. The news comes, as it often does, on the lips of a traveler. This time, it's a tinker, a man who mends pots and pans, who you find resting by your stream. He shares his fire and his bread with you, his face full of the easy gossip of the road. He has come from a distant county, a place called Shropshire, and he tells a strange story that is spreading through the market towns and lonely farms there. It is the story of a man named Richard Munslow. They say he is the last one. The tinker says, his eyes wide. The last of your kind. An old man. A true farmer, but he did it differently. They say, according to the tinker's tale, this Munslow was not a desperate outcast driven to the trade by starvation. He was a respected, if poor, member of his community. He had a small farm, a family, but he had seen the terror of the dying, the fear of those who had no one to perform the old rite for them. So in his old age, he took it upon himself, not for payment, not for food, but out of a sense of duty, out of kindness. The story is so contrary to your own experience that it sounds like a fable. Ace in Minnesota. Respected. Ace in Minnesota. Motivated by compassion. It seems impossible. He died not long ago. The tinker continues, lowering his voice. And the strangest thing happened. The vicar, the priest, he allowed him to be buried in the churchyard, in consecrated ground. They say his tombstone is there for all to see. Richard Munslow. It says, the last sin minor seater. The idea of a sin minor seater's grave being in a churchyard is shocking. You, and all the sin minor seaters of story and lore, are destined for the crossroads, for the unhallowed ditch. To be welcomed into the fold of the church, even in death, is a radical rewriting of the rules. This story of Richard Munslow is, in fact, a real one, and it represents a fascinating undebated chapter in the history of this custom. Munslow died in 1906, and he is widely considered to be the last practicing sin minor seater in England. His story, however, is complex. Some historians believe he was a genuine throwback, a man who revived a dying tradition out of a sense of community obligation. Others have a more cynical take. They suggest that by the early 20th century, the belief had faded, and Munslow was more of a local curiosity, a piece of living folklore encouraged by antiquarians and romantics who were fascinated by the old ways. The story of his kindness might have been a later invention, a way to soften the grim reality of the custom and turn a reviled outcast into a noble, selfless figure. The debate over whether Munslow was a true believer or a historical reenactor continues to this day. But, as you listen to the tinker's story, you don't hear the historical debate, you hear a story of hope, a story that suggests another way of being. Could this grim life be lived with dignity? Could this cursed role be transformed into a noble one? The tinker tells you more. He says that Munslow did not live in a hole in the woods. He lived in his own house. He was not shunned, he was pitied, perhaps, and held in a kind of awe. But he was not an outcast. He took on the sins of his neighbors not as a vulture feeding on death, but as a shepherd guiding the lost sheep. The story plants a seed in the barren soil of your soul. It's a dangerous seed, because it is a seed of hope. You look at your own life, the isolation, the fear, the recent, bitter betrayal. You have always seen yourself as a victim, a man forced into a terrible trade by desperation. Munslow's story offers a different narrative. It suggests that agency is possible, that you can choose not just to be a sin minor seater, but how to be one. You could choose to see the ritual not as a transaction of filth, but as an act of profound empathy. You are not just consuming sin. You are taking on another's fear, their pain, their regrets. You are performing the ultimate act of listening. You are saying to them, I will carry this for you. It is a radical reframing of your entire existence. It doesn't change the physical reality. You are still pure, still living in a hollow. The villagers still fear you. But it changes the internal reality. It changes the story you tell yourself. The tinker leaves the next morning, his pots and pans clanking as he disappears down the track. but his story stays with you. The name Richard Munn slow echoes in your mind. The last sin minus eater, the kind one. You look at your hands, at the dirt and the calluses. Are they the hands of a ghoul, or the hands of a shepherd? For the first time, you feel like you might have a choice. The story of Richard Munslow acts as a strange, internal compass. It doesn't change your direction, but it changes how you feel about the journey. You begin to say your role differently. When you are called to a deathbed, you no longer focus on the grime of the sin you are about to consume. Instead, you focus on the fear in the eyes of the family, the desperation for peace. You are not a spiritual garbage man, you are a ferryman, carrying a heavy burden for the last few feet of its journey. This newfound sense of purpose, however, is being born into a dying world. The ground is shifting beneath your feet. The old ways are crumbling, not with a crash, but with a slow, almost imperceptible erosion. And you, a creature of the old ways, are crumbling with them. The calls become less frequent. Weeks stretch into months with no summons. At first, you think it is a fluke, a healthy season. But then you start to notice the changes in the village. A new vicar has replaced Father Thomas. This one is older, more pragmatic. He doesn't trail against you from the pulpit. He simply ignores you, treating you as an irrelevance. His sermons are less about hellfire and damnation, and more about community and charity. He has started a small fund, a poor box, to help the destitute. It is a more organized, less personal form of charity than the old system of aristocratic patronage and neighborly obligation. It is efficient, and it makes you the ultimate symbol of desperate, ad minus hoc survival, seem obsolete. You also notice more strangers in the village. Men from the city, with strange accents and even stranger ideas. They talk of new farming techniques, of canals being dug, of factories being built in the towns miles away. The world is getting bigger, and the village is no longer the self-contained universe it once was. Young people are leaving, seeking wages in the factories rather than a life of subsistence on the land. They are leaving behind the old fears and the old beliefs. The fear of a bad harvest is being replaced by the fear of a foreman's wrath. This transition from a rural, superstitious society to a more urban, industrial, and enlightened one is what ultimately killed the sin-eater custom. As literacy increased, as science began to provide explanations for what was once attributed to the supernatural, and as the church's message became more focused on a compassionate, forgiving God, the need for a folk ritual to literally eat sin began to fade. The sin-eater became a relic, a quaint and slightly embarrassing memory from a more primitive time. Historians mark this period, the 18th and 19th centuries, as the twilight of these ancient folkways. One day, you hear that a woman has died. A woman you would have expected to be called for. She was a notorious gossip, a woman whose tongue was said to be sharp enough to curdle milk. Her family would have been prime candidates for your services. But the call never comes. You see the funeral procession from a distance. The new vicar is leading it, his voice calm and reassuring. The family looks sad, but not terrified. They seem to be content with the prayers of the church. The market for your particular brand of spiritual comfort is shrinking. The final, definitive sign of your own obsolescence comes one bitter winter evening. A boy comes to your hollow. It is the baker's apprentice. The same boy who called you for his master's wife years ago. He is a young man now. "It's my master," he says, his voice quiet and respectful. "The baker, he's dying." You get to your feet, your old bones aching from the cold. You are ready to perform your service for the man who once shunned you and then, in his grief, paid you with a loaf of his finest bread. It feels like closing a circle. But the young man holds up a hand. He is not asking for you to do the ritual, he says, stumbling over the words. Embarrassed. He is a good man. But he was hard. He drove a hard bargain. He worried about his soul. But the vicar has been with him. He has taken the sacrament. He has made his peace with God. You stand there, stunned. Then why are you here? You ask. The young man reaches into his coat. He remembered you, he says. He remembered that you live out here. He knew the winter was hard. He told me to bring you this. He holds out a bundle. It is a thick woolen blanket and a package wrapped in cloth. Inside the package is a loaf of bread, a hunk of cheese, and a small flask of strong, sweet ale. It is not a payment. It is a gift, an act of charity. The baker, on his deathbed, is not hiring you as a sin minus eater. He is treating you as a poor, old man who needs help. He has replaced the old, superstitious transaction with the new, Christian ideal of charity. You take the bundle, your hands trembling. It is the kindest, most cutting rejection you have ever experienced. The world no longer needs your damnation. It has your pity. And in that moment, you know, with absolute certainty, that your time is over. The ritual is dead. You are officially, finally, unemployed. The baker's gift of charity is a watershed moment. It is the final, quiet signal that your profession has expired. The world has moved on, and you have been left behind, a strange artifact stranded on the shores of a new era. You are no longer a figure of fear and necessity, but something far more mundane. A two-year-old man, living in the woods. The blanket is warm, the food is nourishing, but the accompanying sense of obsolescence is colder than any winter wind. One summer afternoon, a new type of visitor seeks you out. He is not a grieving relative or a frightened child. He is a gentleman from the city, dressed in a tweed jacket and sturdy walking boots. He has a neatly trimmed beard, a pair of spectacles perched on his nose, and he carries a small, leather minus-bound notebook and a pencil. He is polite, cheerful, and entirely unafraid of you. This, in itself, is deeply unnerving. "Excuse me," he says, his voice full of an enthusiastic, academic curiosity. "I was told I might find you here. You are the man they call the sin-minus eater. Are you not?" You nod slowly. Wary, you are used to being an object of fear, not an object of study. "Splendid, splendid." He beams, as if you are a rare butterfly he has just netted. "My name is Alistair Finch. I am a folklorist, a collector of old tales, customs, and songs, the relics of a disappearing age. And you, my good man, are a truly magnificent relic." He doesn't mean it as an insult. To him, it is the highest form of compliment. He sees you not as a person, but as a data point, a living link to a primitive past that he is desperate to document before it vanishes completely. This was a common phenomenon in the 18th and 19th centuries, as industrialization swept across the country. A wave of nostalgia and intellectual curiosity about the authentic rural past emerged among the educated classes. Men like Alistair Finch, antiquarians, folklorists, and early anthropologists fanned out across the countryside, collecting stories, songs, and descriptions of local customs. They are the reason we have any written records of things like the sin-minus eater ritual, but their accounts are often problematic, colored by their own romanticism, their preconceptions, and their inability to truly understand the lived reality of the people they were studying. "I would be most grateful if you would allow me to ask you a few questions," Finch says, already flipping open his notebook. "For posterity, you understand, to preserve this unique custom for future generations." He sits down on a log opposite you, his pencil poised. He begins to ask his questions, his tone that of a cheerful, slightly condescending schoolmaster. "Now the bread," he begins. "Is it always of a specific type? And the salt, what is its symbolic significance? Is it for purification, as in the classical traditions, or is it a binding agent? There is much debate on this point." He is asking you the very questions you have lived, the mysteries you have carried in your gut, but he asks them as if they are a puzzle to be solved, a quaint intellectual curiosity, He wants to know about the tools of your trade, the mechanics of the ritual. He doesn't ask what it felt like. He doesn't ask about the loneliness, the fear, or the crushing weight of the sins. He is interested in the what, not the how it felt. You answer his questions in short, crypt sentences. You describe the bread, the ale, the salt. You tell him about the circling of the bed. You become a narrator of your own life, simplifying and editing it for this curious, detached observer. How could you possibly explain to him the cold malice of the charcoal burner, or the fraudulent emptiness of the innocent girl's bread? Those experiences are not data, they are scars. Fascinating, he mutters, scribbling furiously in his notebook. A clear vestige of a pre-Christian scapegoat ritual. A classic example of sympathetic magic. The sin is transferred through physical contact with an object, which is then consumed. He is dissecting your life, pinning it to a board with Latin phrases and academic theories. He is turning your trauma into a footnote in a book that you will never read. He asks about payment. And what is the customary fee? I groat, I am told. Sixpence. You think of the miser's sons, of the cheating and the humiliation. You think of the Lord's heavy purse, still buried. You think of the baker's gift of bread and cheese. The reality is messy, emotional, and complicated. You give him the simple answer. A few coins, a meal. After an hour, he seems satisfied. He snaps his notebook shut. This has been most illuminating, he says, standing up and brushing the dirt from his trousers. You have been a tremendous help to my research. A true service to history. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a shiny silver shilling. He holds it out to you. For your time, he says, with a magnanimous smile. You look at the coin. It is not payment for eating a sin. It is payment for telling a story. Your life, your curse, your entire existence has been reduced to an anecdote, purchased for a shilling. You take the coin. What else is there to do? He tips his hat to you. Farewell, my good man. You have done your part for posterity. He walks away, whistling a cheerful tune, his notebook full of the neatly catalogued details of your damnation. You are left there, holding his coin, feeling more like a ghost than ever before. You have not just been forgotten by the world. You have been collected, crucified, and filed away. You have officially become a museum piece. The folklore such shilling feels like the final coin in a long and wretched series of payments. You toss it into the stream and watch it disappear into the silt. A small, futile gesture of defiance. After his visit, the world seems to forget you completely. The path to your hollow grows over. The seasons blur into one another. A slow, steady rhythm of cold and damp, punctuated by brief, watery sunshine. You are no longer a sin-eater. You are just an old man. Your body, which has carried you through so much, begins its final betrayal. Your bones ache with a deep, persistent cold that no fire can warm. Your back is permanently stooped now, not just from the psychological weight you've carried, but from the simple, grinding weight of years. Getting to your feet in the morning is a slow, painful process, a negotiation with joints that creak and protest. Your world shrinks to the size of your clearing. The journey to the stream for water is a major expedition. Setting snares for the occasional rabbit is a task that requires a whole afternoon's worth of slow, careful effort. You are living on the ragged edge of survival, but it's a different kind of edge now. It's not the sharp, desperate hunger of your youth. It's a slow, gentle fading, like a candle burning down to its base. In the long, quiet hours, your mind turns inward. The chorus of other people's sins, the memories you consumed, has grown quieter over the years. They are no longer sharp, intrusive flashes. They have mellowed, blended together, becoming a part of the very fabric of your own mind. It's like a tapestry that was once woven with a single, simple thread, your own life, but has had so many other threads woven into it that the original pattern is almost completely obscured. Sometimes, a strange emotion will wash over you, a sudden, inexplicable wave of vanity, and you'll smile and think, that's the Lord of the Manor. A flicker of petty resentment towards a crow for stealing a piece of your bread, and you'll nod to yourself, that's the farmer with the bad fences. You have become a connoisseur of your own contaminated soul. You can identify the different vintages of sin that lie within you. This strange, long-term psychological effect is something the historical record is entirely silent on. The folklore sits and antiquarians were interested in the moment of the ritual. The snapshot in time. They never considered the lifelong aftermath. What happened to a sin-eater when he grew old? Did the sins fade? Did they fester? Did they drive him mad? It's a question that history, with its focus on events rather than emotions, simply cannot answer. We can only imagine it. Sitting here with you in your quiet, sun-dappled hollow. Your own memories of your life before you became the sin-eater are now incredibly faint. Like pressed flowers in a book, their color and scent long gone. The face of your sister, Agnes, the feeling of your father's hand on your shoulder. These are like fragments of a story someone else told you. The life you lived as William or John is a ghost that haunts the man you became. And the man you became is now a ghost haunting the edges of a world that has no place for him. One day, you catch your reflection in a still pool of water by the stream. You don't recognize the face that stares back at you. It is a stranger's face. A landscape of deep etched lines and hollows, with eyes that seem to hold 1,000 secrets. It is the face of a very, very old man, and you realize, with a sudden, calm clarity, that you are dying. It is not a frightening thought. It is, in a way, a relief. The long, lonely journey is finally nearing its end. But with that realization comes a new and final question. A question that is so obvious, so fundamental to your entire existence, that it is astonishing you have never truly considered it before. You have spent your life consuming the sins of others, taking on their burdens to grant them a peaceful end. You have cleansed the souls of the weaver, the lord, the farmer, the baker's wife. You have swallowed their anger, their greed, their regret, their malice. Your own soul is a repository of a generation's worth of transgression, a library of human failing. You are old, you are dying, and there is no one left to do for you what you have done for so many others. There is no one to come to your hollow, no one to place a loaf of bread on your chest, no one to eat your sins. The question hangs in the still air of your hollow, simple and devastating. Who will eat your sins? The irony is so profound, so perfectly, cruelly symmetrical, that it almost makes you laugh. A dry, rasping sound escapes your throat. You, the great spiritual cleaner of the parish, will die with the dirtiest soul of all. Your soul is not just stained with your own meagre sins. A stolen apple in your youth, a light ode to a farmer, the sin of despair that leads you to this life. It is overwhelmingly composed of the sins of others. It is a vast and crowded landfill. You carry the cold ambition of the Lord, the hot rage of the weaver, the greasy avarice of the miser, the black malice of the charcoal burner, the gentle regret of the baker's wife, the quiet fraud of the innocent girl's ritual. You are a walking, dying library of human frailty. And what of the greatest sin of all? The sin of the ritual itself. The sin the vicar, Father Thomas, warned you of all those years ago. The sin of blasphemy, of performing a dark mockery of the holy rite. If he was right, then every single act of cleansing you performed was, in fact, another layer of damnation upon your own soul. You thought you were taking on debt to pay the debts of others, but perhaps you were just accumulating interest on your own. You lie on your bed of straw, the baker's worn blanket pulled up to your chin. The world outside the hollow has faded to a blur of green and grey. Your time is short now. Your breath is shallow. You are becoming one of the figures you visited so many times, a still shape lost in a sea of bedding. In your lucid moments, you contemplate your fate. Where will your soul go? carrying this impossible burden. The villagers believed that the sins you ate were neutralized, vanished, but you know better. They did not vanish. They simply relocated. They moved from their house to yours. You think of the different afterlives you've heard about. The vicar's heaven and hell. A place of divine judgment and eternal reward or punishment, if that is the truth. Your destination seems grimly certain. You are carrying enough sin to heat the furnaces of hell for 1,000 years. Then there are the older beliefs. The whispers of the peddlers and tinkers. The Celtic otherworld. A misty, shuddery place, not of punishment, but of eternal twilight. Or the idea that uncreate souls, heavy with sin or sorrow, are trapped between worlds, forced to wander the earth as ghosts. This seems more likely. You can almost imagine it. Your spirit, a composite entity made of a dozen different souls, forever haunting this patch of woods, unable to find rest because of the sheer, cacophonous weight it carries. This is the ultimate, unanswered question of the sin-minus-eta tradition, a question no folklore could ever answer. What was the perceived eschatological fate of the sin-minus-eta himself? It was a system designed entirely for the benefit of the client, with no thought given to the practitioner's own end. The sin-minus-eta was a spiritual coal-d-sack, a place where sin went to die, taking the vessel with it. The assumption, unspoken but understood, was that he was simply undoubtedly damned, a disposable tool for the salvation of others. You drift in and out of consciousness, in your fevered dreams. You are back at the deathbeds, the faces of the dying flicker before you. The Weaver, the Lord, your friend Peter, they are not accusing you, they are just, they, a silent chorus, waiting to see what becomes of the man who carries their secrets. One afternoon, you wake with a strange clarity. The pain in your bones has subsided. The world seems sharp and bright. You know this is the final rally, the last flicker of the candle before it goes out. You reach into the small pouch you still carry. With trembling fingers, you pull out a small, hard crust of bread you would save. It is stale, almost petrified. You lay it on your own chest. It is a futile gesture. You know, there is no one to eat it, but it feels right. It is the only ritual you know. Then, you do something you haven't done in years. You pray, but you don't pray to the vicar's angry, judging God. You don't know who you are praying to. The old gods of the woods, perhaps, or maybe just to the quiet, listening silence. You don't ask for forgiveness. You don't ask for heaven. You ask for something much simpler. Let it end with me. You whisper, your voice a dry rustle of leaves. Let this all be still. You are not just asking for your own peace. You are asking for peace for all the souls you carry within you. You, the vessel, are making one final plea on behalf of your chaotic, quarrelsome contents. You are asking for oblivion, for a final, quiet dissolution. You close your eyes. The crust of bread on your chest is a tiny, insufficient weight. The sun, filtering through the leaves of the old oak tree, warms your face. You take one last, shallow breath, and you let go. Your story does not end in the quiet hollow under the oak tree. The man, the collection of bone and memory and consumed sins, is gone. But the sin-minus-eta, the idea of you, is just beginning its new life. You are found, eventually, weeks later, by a pair of boys looking for a lost sheep. They peer into the hollow and see your still form, the stale crust of bread still resting on your chest. They run back to the village, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and excitement. The villagers are faced with a problem. What do you do with the body of a sin-minus-eta? The old customs are clear. You should be dragged to the nearest crossroads and buried, perhaps with a stake through your heart to pin your heavy, sin-minus-laden ghost to the earth. The crossroads, a place that is neither one road nor the other, is the traditional burying place for those who do not fit into the Christian order of things. Suicides, the unbaptized, and outcasts like you. But the world has changed. The new vicar argues against it. He was a man, he says, his voice firm, a poor, misguided man, but a man nonetheless. He lived a hard life. We will not add a final cruelty to it. The villagers, their old fears softened by time and the vicar's modern reason, reluctantly agree, so you are not taken to the crossroads, but you are not welcomed into the churchyard either. A compromise is reached. You are buried just outside the churchyard wall, in a patch of unconsecrated ground that is not quite in, and not quite out. It is a fittingly liminal end for a man who lived his entire life on the margins. There is no headstone. A simple wooden cross is hammered into the earth, a cross that will rot and disappear within a few years. Your physical presence is gone, but your story remains. At first, it is a story told by the old people, the ones who remember you. They tell their grandchildren about the strange, stooped man who lived in the woods, the man who would come in the night to eat the sins of the dying. In their telling, you are still a real person, a figure of their own memory. I saw him once. An old woman will say, her voice dropping to a whisper. He had the saddest eyes I ever saw. But as that generation dies out, the story changes. The details get fuzzier. The facts blur into legend. Your name, William or John, is long forgotten. You become, simply, the sin-seeker of the woods. You are no longer a sad, desperate man driven by hunger. You become a creature of the night, a ghoul with glowing eyes who feasts on souls. The hollow under the oak tree becomes a place of dark magic, a haunted cave. Mothers start to use your story to frighten their children into obedience. Be good. They warn, or the sin-seeker will come and smell the wickedness on you. This transformation from a real historical figure into a bogeyman is a common fate for those who live on the fringes of society. Witches, hermits, cunning women. They are all absorbed into the local folklore, their complex human realities flattened into simple, terrifying archetypes. You have become a ghost story, a piece of local color, a monster to make the darkness a little more thrilling. Years later, the folklorist Alistair Finch publishes his book. In it, there is a small chapter titled The Sin-Seeker of Oakhaven. It details the ritual, the bread, the salt, the ale. It quotes your own clip. Sad words. It speculates on the pagan origins of the custom. Your life, your pain, your complex inner world is reduced to 5 pages of dry, academic prose. It is another kind of ghost, trapped between the covers of a book that few will ever read. The village changes. The old cottages are torn down. New houses are built. The woods are thinned to make way for more farmland. The ancient oak tree that was your home is eventually felled. Its roots torn from the earth. All physical trace of you is erased. But still, the story persists. A whisper, a shiver, a local legend. People walking past the churchyard at dusk will sometimes quicken their pace as they pass the section of the wall where you are buried. They don't know why. They just feel a sudden chill, a sense of unease. It is the last, faint echo of the weight you carried. It is the final, faded memory of the man who was paid to eat sins, a man whose real story was far sadder, and far more human, than any ghost story could ever be. The faint chill by the churchyard wall is the last echo of your physical life, but the ghost of your profession, the core idea of what you did, proves to be much harder to bury. The world that created you, a world of isolated villages, folk magic, and a deep seated fear of divine judgment, has vanished. But the need for a sin-eater, it turns out, is not. The role simply changes its costume. You can see the echoes of your strange job flickering in the corners of the modern world, in places you would never recognize. The fundamental concept of the scapegoat, the person or group who takes on the sins of the community so that the community can feel pure, is a timeless human mechanism. It's a psychological sleight of hand, a way of outsourcing guilt, and it is everywhere. Think of the public figures caught in a scandal, The politician, the celebrity, the corporate executive. They are paraded before the court of public opinion. All the collective anxieties and angers of society about greed, corruption, dishonesty are projected onto this single figure. They are ritually shamed, their careers destroyed, their reputations shredded, did away. They are the new loaf of bread, absorbing the sins of a system so that the system itself doesn't have to change. The public consumes their downfall, feels a moment of cathartic release, and then moves on, leaving the disgraced figure to carry the weight of that concentrated shame for the rest of their lives. They are the modern -day subjects of a ritual you would have understood perfectly, or think as a lawyer. The defense attorney who is hired to stand beside a person accused of a terrible crime. They are often reviled, seen as morally compromised for associating with the guilty. How can you defend that person? People ask. Their voices followed the same disgust a villager would have shown you. The lawyer becomes a vessel for the procedural and moral complexities of justice. They absorb the public's hatred and fear, allowing the system of innocent until proven guilty to function. Like you, they are performing a necessary, but often loathed, function, dealing with the dark and messy aspects of society that most people would rather not confront. This idea, that certain professions have become modern inheritors of the sin-eater's role, is a concept explored by sociologists and cultural critics. They argue that as societies become more secular, the mechanisms for dealing with guilt and sin don't disappear, they just transform. The ritual is no longer religious, but social or legal. The damnation is not of the soul, but of one's reputation, one's career, one's public life. You can even see a strange, diluted echo of your work in the world of therapy and psychoanalysis. A person comes to a quiet room and unburdens themselves of their deepest shames, their regrets, their sins. The therapist listens, absorbs this pain, this guilt, this trauma. They hold it for the other person, creating a safe space for it to be processed. Of course, the goal is healing and integration, not a simple magical transference. The therapist doesn't eat the sin, but they do, for a time, carry the weight of another's psychic burden. They are a professional listener to the confessions of the soul, a role that has a faint, but discernible, lineage stretching all the way back to your hollow in the woods. Even the very act of storytelling, of consuming dark or tragic stories for entertainment, has a trace of your ritual in it. We watch documentaries about criminals. We read novels about flawed characters. We are drawn to tales of human failing. In a safe, controlled way, we are consuming small, palatable portions of sin. We experience the thrill of the transgression without any of the consequences. It's a somatized, commercialized version of what you did. You ate the raw, undiluted sin. We consume the processed, packaged version. So while the man who lived under the oak tree is gone, and the specific ritual of the bread and salt is a historical curiosity, the shadow you cast is long. Humanity has never outgrown its need for a place to put its guilt. It has never stopped searching for someone, or something, to eat its sins. You were just one of the earliest, and perhaps most honest, practitioners of a trade that is still, in 1,000 different ways, very much alive. And so, we arrive at the end of the path. Let's step back from the modern world, with its lawyers and its therapists, and return, for one last moment, to the quiet woods. The sun is setting. The light is golden and soft, filtering through the leaves of an ancient oak tree. There is a hollow at its base, a dark and quiet space. It is empty now. It is just a space. The man who lived there is a whisper, a story, a faint chill by a churchyard wall. Let's imagine one final loaf of bread, not a coarse, dark loaf for a farmer, nor a fine, white one for a lord, not a stale crust on a dying man's chest, nor a fraudulent morsel for an innocent girl, just a simple, honest loaf, a loaf for the road. This loaf is for you, the man who was William or John, the man who was driven by hunger and desperation into a life no one would choose. The man who became a vessel for the fears and failures of a whole community. Let's take all the sins you consumed, all the layers of grime and grit that coated your soul, and let's imagine them not as a stain, but as a great weight. A heavy sack of stones you were forced to carry. The cold stone of the charcoal burner's malice, the greasy stone of the miser's greed, the sharp minus-edged stone of the weaver's anger, the heavy stone of the Lord's ambition. For your entire life as a sin-eater, you carried that sack. With every ritual, another stone was added. It bent your back. It slowed your step. It clouded your mind. It was a burden taken on in the service of others. A service for which you were paid in scorn and isolation. But now, your journey is over. The man is gone. The story is told. And here, in this quiet, imaginary space, you can finally set the sack down. Let the stones tumble out onto the mossy ground. Let them be exposed to the air and the light. They are no longer your secrets to keep. They are just what they are. A collection of old, sad human errors. They have no power here. They are just stories. The story of an angry weaver. The story of a greedy lord. The story of a frightened father. And what of your own sin? The sin of taking the job in the first place. The sin of participating in the dark ritual. Let's see that not as a sin, but as a choice. A desperate choice made by a starving man. A choice between a quick death and a slow one. A choice that any of us, in that same position, might have made. Here, in the quiet of the woods, there is no judgment for that choice. There is only a deep, quiet understanding. The historical truth of your existence is debated by scholars. They argue about your origins, your meaning, your ultimate fate. They pick apart the ritual and analyze the folklore, but they can never know the simple, human truth of it. They can never know the gnawing hunger, the bitter cold, the crushing loneliness. They can never know the weight of the bread in your hand, or the taste of another man's regret. That truth belongs only to you. But now, you are free of it. The sack is empty. The stones are just stones. The woods are quiet. There is no one left to fear you. There is no one left to shun you. There is no one left to pay you. The contract is fulfilled. The account is closed. The loaf for the road sits on the moss. It is not for eating sins. It is just bread. A simple, nourishing meal for a long journey into the quiet. And you, the man who was once the sin-eater, are finally at peace. And so, our story, and the life of the man who carried so much, comes to its final, gentle rest. The weight he carried has been laid down, and perhaps, as you have listened, some of the weight of your own day has been laid down as well. The tale is told, the burden is lifted. There is nothing left to do now but drift on the quiet tide that follows the end of a story. Allow the silence that comes now to be a soft blanket, wrapping you in comfort and peace. Let it carry you from this shared space into the private, peaceful world of your own dreams. The final word has been whispered. If your mind is still gently stirring, you're welcome to drift into another of my stories. If not, I wish you a deep and peaceful slumber. Good night.